right, so we'd like to go ahead and call this meeting of the West Allis West Milwaukee School District to order, please. If you could please rise for the pledge, and Mr. Keller, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right, Suzette, if we could do the roll, please.
Yes. Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Eustruck.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Ms. Klug.
Here.
Mrs. Justum.
Here.
Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
President Emmons.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Item number 5 for additions or modifications to tonight's agenda, we are going to be moving item 10.5, the WASB resolutions. Those did not come forward to our WASB delegates until this weekend, and so we were unable to review those in time to make a recommendation for the board for convention in January. So that item will be tabled until January 11th, 2021 board meeting. So that's the addition that I have. Dr. Lexman, are there any other additions or modifications?
No, I have nothing.
Great. Okay. We will then move on to item 6 for the evening, our public comments. In order to make sure that we have that we get access to everybody that wants to make a public comment, if possible, if you could list your name in the chat, similar to if you would be signing in if you were in person, and that way we can make sure that we get everybody called upon who wants to make a public comment tonight. As a reminder for public comments, you do have up to 3 minutes to address the board unless you have made previous accommodations with me. As a reminder, the board does not engage, reply, or debate during public comments, but rather we will be responding after the meeting between now and the next scheduled board meeting. So I want to make sure that everybody that wants to speak tonight gets a chance to do so. So if everyone is able to put their names into the chat, I'll go through and call upon those so that we can get everybody covered this evening. So that being said, we will go ahead and get started here. So we'll go ahead and start. Macy Rodriguez, if you want to go ahead. And then remember to everyone as you make your public comment, please list your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Macy Rodriguez, and my address is 3145 South 106th Street.
Go ahead.
All right. Hi, my name is Macy Rodriguez, and I'm a junior at Nathan Hale High School. I am here tonight to address mine and several of my classmates' concerns regarding online learning. As a member of National Honor Society, Rotary Interact, Best Buddies, the swim and softball team, and junior class president, I feel that I am very involved in my school community and that I have a duty to express what others like me are going through during the last 9 months of the COVID-19 pandemic. What I hope to express to you tonight is my respect and admiration for my teachers, a personal account of the struggles that I and so many others have had on a daily basis, and finally, offer a suggestion as to how we as a district can improve upon our learning experience. Despite the last 9 months being completely flipped upside down and for the most part a miserable and draining experience, I can say with confidence that my teachers have made it so much more tolerable. I could never express enough gratitude to every teacher who has taught me these past 2 semesters. They are understanding, flexible, and always willing to help each and every one of us succeed. Your hard work and genuine dedication to your profession and to your students' well-being is commendable and deserves to be recognized. So to every teacher out there, thank you. You are doing a wonderful job. The main reason I am here tonight is to express mine and my classmates' struggles with the way online school has played out this past semester. My whole life, school has been something I valued, looked forward to, and truly loved. I can no longer say the same. Now, waking up and spending 7 consecutive hours on a computer screen is draining and depressing, which in turn has caused me to lose so much passion for my education. As I find it more and more difficult to get all of my assignments done, I find myself prioritizing certain classes and assignments because it is impossible to complete them all. Not only are us students missing out on a very important part of school, the social aspect, We are also receiving a heavier workload with less work time than we would during a typical in-person school year. This is not healthy or manageable, and I fear for mine and my peers' mental health and sanity. It is frustrating to watch myself go from someone who is so excited to attend school to someone who no longer loves school. If this experience has made me, a straight A student who has always loved school, feel depressed and overwhelmed, I can only imagine what it has done to those who never shared that same excitement and adoration of learning. To further corroborate my point on the toll this is taking on students, I would like to mention that for the first time ever in my life, the suicide hotline is printed on the back of my school ID. Lastly, I'd like to offer suggestions to how the learning experience can be improved. I do this because I know how frustrating and difficult it can be to offer a learning plan that accommodates everybody. Perhaps shorter on Zoom class times and more work time and opportunities for one-on-one teacher interaction during the school day would be a great start. I do not presume to tell you how to do your job. I just feel that if I'm going to criticize the system in place, I should also offer a suggestion that could better meet students and teacher needs. In closing, I would like to make it clear that I am not asking for sympathy or a pat on the back for my accomplishments, but rather, I do this to give voice to the struggles of myself and so many of my peers during this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Macy. Rick McMillan, please.
Hi, Rick McMillan, 12255 West Holt Avenue. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. All right. So good evening and thank you for your time and attention. It's only fitting that my opportunity to speak tonight follows that of Ms. Rodriguez. While I would typically be hesitant to follow such a performance, Ms. Rodriguez is the primary reason I am here. Now, I've never met Ms. Rodriguez formally, even though she and my daughter are both on the swim team. Go Wave. I don't believe we've ever spoken before, but on Tuesday, December 8th, I stumbled upon a Facebook post that she wrote. Despite being a little glad to see that Facebook is not yet something that just us old people use, her story was heartbreaking and instantly I felt compelled to take action. Here was one of our best and brightest, 4.3 GPA, class president, National Honor Society member, involved in sports and other activities, crying out for help. She used words like depressing, draining, fear for the mental health and safety of she and her peers, loss of motivation and interest in school, and feeling like a complete failure. These words from a student like Ms. Rodriguez should strike fear in us all, and knowing that she is not alone should worry us as much as the pandemic that we currently face. Now, as moving as it was to read Ms. Rodriguez's words, they aren't the sole reason I'm here. My wife and I have observed the same struggles with our own children, and we've long felt dismayed that the district has continued to perpetuate a 100% virtual model, while our neighboring districts have proven that in-person learning can be successful and safe. My wife and I have 3 wonderful, intelligent, beautiful children, one in 11th grade, one in 7th grade, and one in 6th grade. My 11th grade daughter, like Ms. Rodriguez, maintains a GPA above 4.0, is also a National Honor Society member, and is also involved in sports and other activities. She, along with our 2 other children, have struggled at times to remain interested and motivated, and each of them want to be back in school with peers. While more scientists and physicians recommend that children be learning in school and warn against the dangers of extended virtual learning, the same types of dangers my children, Ms. Rodriguez, and so many others have experienced, our students remain disengaged, sitting alone in their rooms in front of a screen for hours on end, as our wonderful yet poor teachers struggle to reach them through black boxes containing only names on their screens. Sorry, give me just 1 second. My screen went away here. Sorry, the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District is currently on the outside looking in with our response, and our children are falling further and further behind. Having observed my family's struggles, then suddenly coming to the realization that there were many others who were also struggling and or felt the same way about the value of in-person learning, I decided to become more active and vocal, which included starting an online petition as a simple way for those parents, families, and students to indicate their support for such an option. The response was overwhelming. In a matter of 24 hours through Facebook sharing alone, hundreds of parents and students signed, and the number continues to grow. Now, let me pause for a moment to be very clear about something. In no way are our teachers responsible for these struggles many have expressed. We have some amazing teachers in the district. My children have been blessed with amazing teachers. I have the utmost respect for all of the teachers in our district who have been placed in new, extremely challenging situations. I can't imagine where we would be without these caring, dedicated employees. Now, I also recognize that not everyone will agree with in-person learning, and I respect that. These are difficult times that require thought, collaboration, compromise, and healthy discussion. It's important, though, for administration, the board, and families to understand there are a large number of parents, students, and faculty who feel strongly that a change must be made and would support a return to in-person learning, or at least an option for it. We see it being successful in the districts surrounding us. We see our children struggling, and we wonder why those we've entrusted with the education of our children seem to be ignoring the evidence to the contrary. Now, I encourage board members, administrators, and all listening to look at the successes of neighboring school districts. I encourage you to listen to the prevailing narrative among scientists and physicians expressing concern over virtual learning and support for in-person learning. I encourage you to acknowledge the will of so many parents. And if nothing else, I beg you to hear the pleas for help from so many students like my children and Ms. Rodriguez, for our decisions today weigh mightily on their tomorrow. Now that you've been made aware, failure to act is not an option. Something must change, and myself and at least 600 other parents and students stand committed and ready to give you our support and to work alongside you for the sake of their tomorrow. Thank you.
Mr. McMillan. Doug Beasley is up next.
Hello, my name's Doug Beasley, 1229 South 72nd Street. First of all, I want to thank the board for their decision to, back in July, to go virtual to keep our students, our teachers, and our entire community of West Dallas, West Milwaukee safe during this pandemic. I understand that people are getting sick of the pandemic. It's frustrating for us all, but we do have to remember that we're part of a community and that all people, not just children, not just parents, not just teachers, are affected by this decision. That it would impact caregivers, it would impact all the people who would be exposed if we went back to in-person learning. I do want to say that my son is a 6th grader at Frank Lloyd Wright, and I have been very happy with his virtual experience. It's been very consistent, and his teachers have been very responsive. He made some issues that on Wednesdays he was basically climbing the walls because he wasn't engaged, and his GCT teacher reached out to him and others and found a book reading club and was very attentive to those needs. My daughter, on the other hand, is attending a local private high school, and she has had the experience of being hybrid and virtual. We chose to keep her virtual to maintain the safety of that situation. And due to the hybrid nature of the way her school's doing it, students going both virtual and in person, it has been a lot more stressful for her because of all the inconsistencies and continual shutdowns because of COVID outbreaks, quarantining, and the like, causing her not to have as smooth and consistent an educational experience. My personal experience that I can speak to is that I'd let you also know that I am an educator myself in one of those neighboring districts that is going face to face. And I want you to know that that has not been as smooth as it's being made out to be. I have had similar experiences as my daughter, where quarantining, children going in and out, and the pervasive sub shortage has caused teachers to stretch to cover each other's classes while trying to deliver quality education. I think a lot of teachers are stretched to their limit and are becoming overly stressed as compared to what West Allis, West Milwaukee is doing by providing a stable, consistent educational experience during a worldwide pandemic. I urge the board to stay the course, to not give way to the stresses of a pandemic and open up prematurely. They're caregivers to the community, not just the teachers and students of West Allis, West Milwaukee, but to the entire community. That includes the grandparents and other caregivers who will be exposed when outbreaks do happen, and they will. I strongly urge the board to stay the course till winter is over and we all have a chance to receive the vaccine so that we can do this in the smart way that so many of the other nations in the world are doing. Canada has had 14,000 deaths compared to ours. And that is because they are making good decisions about public health. And the school board is one of those entities that has to make smart public decisions for the health of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baisley. Jason Darling, please.
Can you see me?
Go ahead.
All right. It's 11037 West McWanago Drive. I'm going to kind of shoot from the hip here just because I'm going off of Macy's and Rick, and I don't want to basically double down on a lot of stuff. But my concern is, I'm going to skim read here, so I might miss something, but I'm going to go for it here. As they said, the other districts are open. Some of them are open within our district as far as the privates and Catholics. Daycares that have figured it out since day one, but West Allis and West Milwaukee can't seem to figure some kind of balance out. But I'm wondering how daycares are doing it. Private sports have been doing it throughout all of COVID. Recently, within the last couple of weeks now, our government officials, medical experts, Fauci himself, CDC, who we originally was said that we were going to be following CDC guidelines. Pediatricians, everyone is saying that kids are supposed to be open. I understand that we have adults in the building doing that. And the interaction, as Doug was saying, that goes on, but all the other communities are able to figure this out and move past it and figure something out for the families, for the kids, the teachers, and somehow it works. And I'm wondering what we need to do to get to that point, to get it to work. I personally have had to do it twice for training. I had to do 2 days on Zoom and then 3 days in class. None of us like the Zoom. Maybe it's an age difference thing too, but we go from preaching screen time to now forcing screen time. Our learning levels in readings and talking with other people have gone down. Attention's definitely gone down. And that goes from our elementary all the way to the high school. There's nothing but stories about, screens not being on, side chats going on, people not showing up for it or logging into it. And then on the flip side now, we're coming after people's income here, because I know some families have taken a leave of absence. They've quit their job to be able to maintain this. I understand that we're doing the best that we can as far as what we're being faced with, but all in all, production is down. And it's more importantly for the kids. We need to get them back on track. We need to get them not only for educational purposes, but mental purposes, back in interacting, social, when they have a question with a teacher, be able to have that interaction and that direct guiding. Some stuff cannot be done over the screen. Have they done a good job based off of what they're required to do? I'm going to say yes. But I mean, you got to factor in there's only so much that you can do over a screen. There's some things that need to be done in person, shown. All the kids are learning differently, so not necessarily listening to it. They need to listen to it. They need to see it. They need to do it, or have it shown to them directly. Maybe it's one-on-one. And as far as I keep seeing posts and stuff about pats on the back with how well we're doing, and I just got to say I think we're not doing that well. And I don't know if anyone has seen too, but Greendale High School, they changed their grade scale has now changed. They have admitted that as problematic after they're nearing the end of the first semester. I don't agree with that, and I hope that that's not our next course of action, that where we can basically dumb it down to make it all seem better and feel like we're doing better. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Darling. Member Smith?
Hi, I would like to start with thanking all of the teachers who have taken this time through everything that we've all been going through. My address is 3675 South 88th Street. I am the legal guardian of a child who goes to Frank Lloyd Wright, and he has been actually performing very well with the online school. I was a bit concerned at first because of his attention issues, but I've been able to go over all of the content and help him with his homework, and he's understanding fairly well. And I believe that that is the doing of the teachers who he's working with, being able to give individual attention even over a screen. I do have some concerns with possibly opening up and having kids meet face to face. I work in retail. I'm a manager in a nearby mall, and our stores, once we went in person throughout this holiday season, we have experienced many cases of breakouts of COVID, many store shutdowns, and it has not been consistent. Customers who are like trying to come in, if they can't find a product in our store, usually we'd be able to say, hey, we could look up, see who has it nearby. Let's get it for you that way. Due to us all being in person and seeing all of these people so commonly, we can't even tell people, hey, go to that store, because I don't know what store is open because of how rapid this COVID problem is becoming. And I don't want the same thing to happen to the districts. I don't want my child who I have custody of to be like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to this class because it might have had to shut down because of these cases that are outbreaking. I'm worried about the consistency. Right now, he is able to attend all of his classes without fail each week. There had only been one case where he couldn't have that gym class like regular, so therefore we went out and made our own gym class. We were able to go for a walk around the city, still get that fresh air, which I feel is really important for people as well. Even when it gets colder, going out for regular walks to try to get rid of that cabin fever a bit. But I do want everybody to be safe within the whole community, and people, even if they're trying to limit the interactions they have, probably have a bigger bubble than they seem. Meanwhile, like this child who I'm taking care of, because I work in this mall environment in retail, his bubble includes everybody who I come in contact with, because then I come home and interact with them every day. And that's a huge reason why our district might not be ready to go in person, even if other districts are, because we're huge. Our schools have an amazing diverse community, and that has its upsides. But when it comes to a pandemic, that means that all of these people from all over the place are going to be meeting in person, and that's just going to make cases skyrocket. And I want everybody to be safe. I have multiple friends' parents who have passed away because of COVID, even if they were staying at home and their child was just going out and meeting up with their friends. So I would like for everybody to keep that in mind, that our bubbles are bigger than they seem, and meeting in person will just expand that by a landslide. I would like to thank everybody for committing their time, especially everybody who is involved with this community, everybody who's on those sports teams. I want to build that community passion, but I don't want to meet in person until it's safe for everybody to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. Amy Riley.
Hi, my name's Amy Riley, 2115 South 97th Street. I totally understand that it's hard to make everybody happy, but my feeling is just to have a choice. You know, like New Berlin, they have the choice, whether virtual or in person. And that's all I'm asking. It's so hard for me to come home every day to see my children depressed, not productive with the, what's right for some children is not right for all. It's really hard for me to keep hearing the word pandemic when most of us are living our lives, basically uninterrupted. We still go to Target, we still go to restaurants, bars, but my children can't go to school. So it's just really hard for me to keep hearing that. Teachers are essential workers. My husband and myself are essential workers. We go to work every day. I don't understand what makes them, I don't want to use the word special, but why they can't go to work. I don't ever feel like I'm putting myself in danger going to work, and it's just really hard for me to hear. If you put the right precautions and you are safe, I guess I don't understand. I definitely feel the risk is worth the reward for these children. The children should be the #1 priority here. And I don't feel that they are being taken into account enough. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. Lauren Nelson.
1347 South 119th Street. My biggest concern with this is I have 2 young kids in elementary school, and they have been going to the summer camp through the rec department all summer, and our schools aren't safe enough to open, but for $100 a kid per week, it's safe enough for me to send them to the high school to do their virtual learning there. The staff there has been amazing, but by the time they don't get to all their homework and all their school things because the aides can't help all the kids that are there. And by the time they get home and I'm able to help them because both my husband and I work full time, they're spent. I can't get them to sit down in front of their tablets to do their homework and their learning. And these are elementary school kids who are being forced to sit in front of their tablets, not getting the one-on-one attention they need to learn their writing, their math, and reading and spelling. And it's a real struggle. I'm sick of hearing my kids say I'm stupid all the time and crying when it comes to their schoolwork because they're not getting the education that they are accustomed to. Both of my kids have been going to school since 3K in person, so they're used to the in-person learning, and it's a real struggle. So I would like to see us go back to in-person. Or if people don't want to send their kids back to school, I fully support that as well. Then we should have that virtual option for those individuals. But it's a real struggle to work, both parents working full time and trying to manage 2 elementary age students and their learning on top of everything else. It's not fair to our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Stephanie Marquez.
Hi, Stephanie Marquez, 2246 South 72nd Street. First of all, I would just like to voice what a few others have said about, I'm very thankful for my kids' teachers. I have 5 kids in the district, so I have children on every level. I have K4, I have elementary school, I have middle school, and I have high school. What I heard somebody else say, and I very much so agree with, some of my kids have by far excelled the virtual, completely online part of school, but there's others that are falling way behind. What is good for one kid is not always good for all of them. I'm especially my high schooler. He was straight A's. He was in sports, and I don't want to put his, whole business out there, but at this time he is greatly struggling. I have seen him give up. And it's just, as a parent, it makes me emotional because, I just want the best education for each of them. And again, some of them are doing really well, but I worry about my kindergartner. Carrie Hendricks is his teacher. She has been great. She was my other son's teacher when he was in kindergarten. All these teachers are doing an excellent job, but virtual learning is not for every child. My husband is the director of a technical college in the area. They have been able, in Fond du Lac, they have been able to remain open, the campus, during the pandemic. They have measures in place to where, wearing masks, other things, where it has so far functioned well. I look at other districts in the area and see what has worked for them. For some, it has been going, it seems like okay. I have heard of the cases where, somebody in the classroom gets it and then the whole classroom has to quarantine because they came in contact. I've heard of that. But bottom line, I feel like as parents, we should have a choice. If not everybody wants to go back to in person, completely understandable. I understand there's health risks. There's, people have lost family, and it's just, it's really real to them. It's real to all of us, but I feel like we should have a choice as to what we feel is best for our children. I feel like education is completely essential. And the pandemic is not going away. Sorry, somebody came in. The pandemic is not going away anytime soon. And if we wait for it to go away and just stay out of school, how far behind are our children going to fall? So yeah, that's basically all I have to say. I think as parents, we should have a choice as to whether our kids go back to school. And I believe that for many of them, in person is the best way to go because they're falling behind, they're getting depressed. I talked with my doctor this last week, and he voiced his kids are in school in the Wauwatosa district. They go to in-person, I think 2 days a week. And he said he doesn't know or understand or see a reason why West Dallas is one of the few that are still completely 100% virtual. It's affecting the kids' emotional and mental health. And that is it's just as much important as, their physical health. So that's all I want to say. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Marquez. Okay, moving on, Michael May.
Yes, thank you, school board members. And my address is 837 South 113th Street. Happy holidays to everyone. And thank you for hosting the meeting this evening. I want to thank everyone for their comments that have come before me as well. I think everyone has had a certain candor about them and very professional sounding. So everyone who's spoken, nice job. I just want to say thank you to the school board for following the advice of local health professionals. One thing I notice is the dashboard is a bit confusing. As you may know, I'm an engineer with a master's degree in engineering, and yet still I find it a bit confusing. Looking at it myself, it looks like some of the metrics we need to move towards some opening are currently moving or inching towards at least a partial open in some ways. At least that's what I'm reading from the table. And I just want to make sure that, is there any way the school board could possibly simplify that table a little bit to just make it a little bit more user-friendly so we understand a little bit easier? Also, when schools do go back in session, I would just ask that we keep a virtual option. My wife does work at a hospital as a frontline worker, and she sees a lot, and it's nothing that we want to catch here at home. And so if she's not bringing it home, we don't want the kids bringing it home from school either. Other than that, again, I want to thank the teachers. I think they've done a fantastic job with the virtual learning option over at Lane and at Walker Elementary. I also want to thank all the resource officers who have been available. If my kids have had bouts of sadness or depression, they've had someone to go to at the school to speak with who have been able to help them out a lot. So thank you again. I wish everyone, again, a happy holidays. And again, please stay the course, but perhaps make the metrics a little bit easier for people to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. Dolores Greenewalt?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi, so my address is 13185 West Wilbur Drive. And I wanted to come here to talk about the drastic measures that my husband and I have taken to get our kids in person school. In fact, we pulled our kids out of the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District as of Friday, and we put them in a private school because they were suffering mentally and emotionally from virtual schooling. I'm also an educator, and I understand how scary it can go back, especially in person at the beginning, but it was like pulling a Band-Aid off. Once we got into the routine at school, it worked out well for a lot of students. And at Carroll, those who wanted to stay virtual could stay that course. However, my children fell behind virtually. Their attention span is practically nothing at this point. They were depressed, they were anxious, they were sad, they were angry, they were hungry, they were crabby. They're everything but happy. My middle schooler often got A+, which sounds wonderful, but it's not because she was actually doing A+ work or learning. It's because of the fact that she was simply getting her work handed in. My first grader's reading level dropped 3 levels, and he gained weight from running around stealing snacks. And yes, we were trying to pay attention to that as well. My husband and I were very lucky in terms of employment. We know families who have suffered and have had to quit their job and are losing out on income. And while I agree that some kids are thriving, and I hope that they can continue to be virtual, I also know that there's a slew of children that you guys are not helping by staying virtual. Our pediatrician and the entire pediatrician's office, which consists of at least 7 other doctors, said kids need to be in school. The CDC said it's vital to get kids back in school. Fauci has said that it's important to get kids back in school. And every single one of those people recognize that there is a pandemic going on, but they also realize that there needs to be a choice. It does not work for everybody. These kids deserve a choice. The parents deserve a choice. And while the choice, whatever it may be for you guys, is too little, too late for us as a family, but for the sake of other families, you guys should really act immediately. Not only are you going to lose more families and they will leave the district, you're also going to lose those who are in the district who are suffering from not being able to retain the knowledge that they may or may not be learning virtually. The amount of time that catch-up time that teachers are going to have to do is also going to hurt the kids once they are back in school. So again, while the decision is too late for us, I just wanted to let you guys know that it is affecting families, and there are lots of families I know that have actually left the district because of this. And I miss I love my Hoover teachers. They were absolutely phenomenal. But we had to do what was best for our kids. And unfortunately, we took such drastic measures that meant that we had to leave the district in order to get our kids back in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greenwald. Kara Whitty?
Hi, can you hear me? Yep. So I wasn't going to talk, and then I was listening to a bunch of people's comments, and I was like, oh, what the heck, I'm going to talk. My address is 1451 South 86th Street. My son is a junior at Hale. When the school board and everything voted in August, I believe it was, about going virtual, I was like, all right, this kind of makes sense. We're gonna try to do the safe thing to do. But as the weeks have gone on, and I've had friends in other districts where a hybrid model at least was working for them. My son has gone back and forth a couple times. When the numbers are real high, he's like, I just want to stay virtual, mom, this is fine. But in the last few weeks, I've noticed a complete change in his motivation. He's got AP classes, he's got ACT tests coming up, and he's like, Mom, I don't even know if I want to take those tests. I know you've paid for them, but I don't know if I am studying enough and working hard enough and getting out of these classes. I mean, AP Gov, AP Lang, hour and a half. I mean, they're tough classes, and to stay motivated through those classes, I've been trying to push them along. I myself have been working from home since March. And I can tell you, since it's gotten darker out, I'm getting crazy too. So him and I are both kind of starting to be on the same page where we need to go out. I mean, I left the house for hot dog buns the other day just because I needed fresh air. So I can only imagine what's going on with some of these kids might not have parents home during the day to help them stay motivated. Or having to help siblings to stay motivated. So I guess what my suggestion would be is to try to figure out a hybrid. I'm not saying 5 days a week by any means, to try to figure out some sort of hybrid program to at least help some of these kids that are really, really starting to struggle being at home. And, second semester, I mean, there's some time. I get staying through the holidays, staying afterwards. Hopefully maybe our numbers will get down. Wisconsin does seem to be a little better, but hopefully at that point, the second semester, maybe start with the plan of the 4, 5, 6, and 12th graders. But maybe try to think about a model of, if the numbers stay down, let's work on the end of February to get more kids back versus let's just see what the metrics are. I mean, the metrics at this point, they're probably not going to change. And I think you're just going to start losing more and more kids. And I'm worried that in May, when those AP tests come around, that my kid's just going to be like, I don't know what to do, and he carries a lot of guilt with him. And I think a lot of juniors do, with not passing those tests when their parents are paying money for them. So that's what I guess that's what my suggestion would be, is just to try to push forward with a hybrid. I don't think 5 days a week is a good idea. I know there's substitute problems, or I shouldn't say problems, concerns, that there might not be, enough people available, which is why I would suggest a hybrid model, at least for the time being. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Okay. That concludes public comments based on registration. So we will then move on to item 7, the superintendent's report. Dr. Lexman.
Great. Good evening, everybody, and thank you. I want to start, we start 7.1 with the returning to school plan update. And so for the number of people that are in the meeting today, first of all, thank you for participating. I think it is very helpful when there's more engagement. And I'm particularly impressed, kind of like Michael, with the kind of concern and eloquence of the speakers this evening. I think it says a lot about how we're trying to figure this out together. And like I've said in a bunch of communications as we've worked through all of this, there's no perfect solution for everyone. And some of our speakers even talked about that today. So what I want to do, come on, present. There we go. So this is our update for December 14th, 2020. And like we always do, start with a little agenda. The first agenda item is not a slide, it's really just a note here that I want to, in particular, express appreciation for the folks that took the opportunity to speak during public comment. I appreciate how much value there is in our teachers. I think that is absolutely phenomenal for us to hear, and we will certainly pass that along. I appreciate the voices of support for the approach we've taken, but I also appreciate the criticism. That's how we get a good pulse of where we are and trying to navigate this whole thing. I also, on this first agenda item here, want to also just express that there have been a lot of email that have come in, and they are both kind of, we need to do something different or don't do anything different. This is working. So that pattern of the messages is consistent, but there's far more email than the individuals that spoke this evening. And so if anybody who is in the meeting this evening has emailed myself or the board, I apologize that I haven't kept up with the amount of email that have come in. I just wanted to everybody to hear we're reading them, we receive them, but there's just not enough time in the day with everything else these days to keep up with it. So then I'll touch a little bit on health metrics, and some of the speakers recognize that things are starting to improve our internal metrics. And then I'm going to talk about the options we're starting to explore to move to phases 2 and 3 for second semester. And there's a number of next steps that are going to have to kind of play out. There's not a promise of a direction in this. I want to get feedback from our health department. I'm going to meet with the president of our teacher association. We're going to then bring the whole big committee back together and eventually get back in front of the board with maybe a possible next step direction. So our health metrics, the ones we have been using, and that's a little bit foreshadowing that there may be other metrics as we start to look at how other districts have organized themselves or have adapted over this time. But things have improved 2 weeks in a row now, and that's encouraging. And the drop here in West Allis, West Milwaukee COVID burden number is pretty substantial. And so if that continues, it actually starts getting us close to the metrics we've currently set to start moving forward. And so meaning moving into phases 2 or 3. So I encourage everybody to continue to be really cautious, wear masks, good hygiene, stay apart. It looks now like we're not going to get a bump in, at least locally, from Thanksgiving, but there's another holiday, right upon us. And so hopefully we can keep this trend going. Our internal metrics, and I did fix the date here for this meeting today. These remain pretty consistent, but again, we're all virtual. So these are coming either out of camps or out of sports and activities, right? And so with staff, only one that's work related. So that is very encouraging to us. So it means that staff that do have close contact, it's happening elsewhere. And also with students, only 4 school related. So I think we're getting better at the way we're managing kind of the mitigation practices. So this is really the meat of the presentation today, so to speak. So like I mentioned, considering moving to some internal metrics similar to neighboring school districts. So I think this will pop open. So Franklin's, this is their dashboard. Michael, if you're still listening, I find ours a little bit, difficult to interpret. This one is more difficult to interpret, but the gist of it is they really have focused on 2 metrics. One is the internal positivity rate, and they do it by district and then by school. And then the other is really the challenges of staff absences. And that leads to the, can we get enough substitute teachers? And then there's a point at which you can have all the best mitigation practices in the world and have everything going really well, but there's so many adults that are ill or quarantining that you can't safely operate a school. And so this is an example of something that we're considering in terms of looking at more internal metrics. What happened here? There we go. So this is the right from Franklin right now. And again, I'm not suggesting this is exactly where we're going to go, but I want to take the lessons learned from other school districts and to see if they can apply to us. So less than 1.5% positivity rate means we're good to go. 1.5 to 3, we're then really watching, but I think we would still be in phase 2 or 3. And if it goes over 3, then going back to virtual. And staff absences at 10% or less is, I think, a benchmark. And even that's a little bit difficult to commit to in every single school. Because in a Nathan Hale High School, if you're 10% or higher of staff absence, it gets pretty hard to run the building without a whole bunch of other adults that come in, and we know we have a hard time getting substitute teachers. However, at a Madison, that's 1 teacher. And Madison can adapt to 10% or even 20% of staff that would be absent on any given day. So that one takes a little more thought. There's two studies that we've been looking at. Duke University has done a very nice job on their campus with really good mitigation practices. So there's lessons there. And then a more recent Brown University study, and this really just links to an article that summarizes it. And the findings there are really that it is possible to start bringing kids back to school. And we think we know enough about it now. And this study is probably the best that looked at transmission in schools. And even though there is transmission, schools do not turn into super spreader sites. And I think that's the thing that makes me a little more comfortable with starting to think about how do we move more quickly into phase 2 or 3. And so what we're talking about behind the scenes is beginning, if the health department is comfortable, if the return to school committee says, yeah, this is starting to make sense for what we know and where we are now, and then the board approves this right at the very first Monday in January, then we'll be in track to move forward for second semester. And we would, like I've talked about recently, begin with students in 4K, 5K, 6, and 9 for just 2 days, and then move all students to phases 2 and 3 on February 1st. Now, this gives us a good number of weeks between now and then, and hopefully the trend continues to improve. I think that would really build some confidence for families maybe that are a little bit nervous about all of this. We would continue a all virtual option, although virtual in hybrid is not going to be of the quality that it is right now, because then teachers have some students that are face-to-face right with them in school, and they have kids that are learning virtually. So it's not a perfect solution, but none of this is. We are talking about changing the cohorts to 2-day-a-week cohorts. Originally, we had worked through in our earlier plan a Monday, Thursday group, and then a Tuesday, Friday group. And the initial feedback and conversations with teachers that it was better instructionally for kids. But as we've worked this forward, and Deidre and I have met with high school teacher leaders as well as elementary, and their later feedback is they very much prefer the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. For the high schools that are running a kind of modified block, it actually is much better for them to have the kids our students go through their entire schedule over that 2 days. So it becomes kind of, the whole 8-hour day gets done over 2 days. So that made more sense. And then, of course, again, with the cleaning and contact tracing, this is probably better organized with the cohorts like this. And like I've said along the way here, we get new information, we learn, we adapt. And so we started with this, we got some information, we had changed it, and now we're going back to where we were. And then there's some issues that have to get resolved of rec camps and before and after school care. I know in communicating with Shelley today, they do plan on offering before and after school care for the kids that are in school on the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, like we've done in the past. The rec camp becomes a different kind of dynamic to resolve. Right now, it's in multiple sites, serving over 100 kids. And because we would now have students in schools, we wouldn't be able to use those schools as the rec camp sites for the kids that are only in school 2 days a week and then virtual 3 days a week. So the plan is to run a camp for 40 students at the rec center. And which 40, those are some of the things we kind of have to work through to figure out how to make all of that happen. So with that, what I want to mention is, where we're learning along the way here. And this is not a slide that I've built. This comes from the Southeast Wisconsin School Association, SWSA, and the board's familiar with that. It's a consortium of neighboring school districts that really work together on legislative priorities. But even this organization has shifted a bit and is really helping us kind of gather input and information. And so the most recent meeting was last week, Tuesday, and they had doctors from Children's Hospital. And so they were also supportive of either bringing students back if they're in virtual or continuing with hybrid. And so the circled thing here is the blue are the notes that were being taken during the meeting, during the Q&A with the doctors from Children's. And so the measures that schools are taking to mitigate, to contact trace seem to really make a difference. And so we have been quietly building out that capacity. So we think that will be very helpful for us. And then also there's a link here, and this will be the same presentation we share with the Returning to School Committee. This is again to that article that references Brown University. And then the Duke study was referenced by the doctors from Children's Hospital as well. So again, last week, Monday, I talked about one kind of approach that we were in. And on Tuesday morning, I get a whole new kind of education about where we are with the science, and we learn, we get new information, we learn, we adapt. So next steps. I have to figure out how to move you guys. There you go. So meeting with the West Isles Health Department on December 16th, and essentially talking about the same idea of shifting to more internal metrics and those currently we're meeting those metrics. And so that would allow us, I think, in a reasonable time frame to be able to pivot to what we call distance learning, or phases 2 and 3 for the start of second semester. I think it makes sense to consider that at the start of second semester. It's just a natural break. And it allows us to make sure we've got everything else planned for and accounted for as much as possible. Then I'll be meeting with the Returning to School Committee on December 18th, so that's this Friday. Again, walking through, and there may be new information that comes from the health department that gets shared. I have a note here that Dr. Johnson, he's our medical director. Every school district has a medical director, and he is on the Returning to School Committee, and you see his email that he sent. So he can't join us, but he is supportive of kids going back to school. And again, we've heard some of the public comments related to the CDC recommendations, and more recently, Dr. Fauci's. And then if the board is supportive, I'd like to ask for a special meeting on January 4th. So it's the first Monday right after the break, to consider a revision to our Returning to School plan and consider and take action on that, because action on the 4th, I think, will allow us to have 3 weeks to really put the final pieces in place to implement phases 2 and 3 at the beginning of second semester. And the way that would start to roll out is that the January 25th is a records keeping day. So it's really report cards and finalizing all those things at the end of the semester for teachers. The 26th is an extra professional development day. And we did that last week for 2 reasons. One is to allow principals to focus on some instructional strategies that they see teachers need to do some development work around. But then also, if all of the pieces come together here and we're going to start moving into phases 2 and 3, there's an additional kind of planning day in there. Then that Wednesday is a day that where, it would be kind of a typical Wednesday that we have now. And then we think it makes sense that we would use that Thursday, Friday to introduce all of the kids, kind of orientation days for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6th graders, 9th graders, right? So it gives us 2 days to introduce kids that haven't been in their school buildings yet. We could spread out the 4K kids over those 2 days, because part of the challenge with 4K having not been in buildings, there's going to be a lot of anxiety for moms and dads, and often moms and dads want to come in buildings. And is there a way for us to work that out by spreading the kids out over a couple of days? And then on the Monday, the following week, which happens to be February 1st, then we would implement phases 2 and 3 all at the same time for all grades. So 4K through 12th grade would start the 2-day-a-week rotations. And if things go well and the local metrics continue to improve, our internal metrics continue to be stable, and by then I think we'll have a much better sense of kind of the implications of the vaccine. I think it's reasonable a month later, we're looking at potentially moving to 5 days. One of the things I've definitely learned from my superintendent colleagues is the most difficult transition is the one we're talking about right now, going from virtual to a 2-day-a-week plan. And it's the best way to maintain social distancing, right? Because we have half of the kids with us on any given day. And it also cohorting the kids for contact tracing purposes. So that's an advantage, but instructionally, it's much more challenging because some kids are going to be face-to-face, others virtual, and all of it needs to happen at the same time. And so kind of staging it through this way, I think will allow us to do the best job we can, knowing that like this, all virtual, the hybrid will be, or distance learning, won't be perfect either. But that's where we are today. It's quite a shift from a week ago, but again, there was new information on Tuesday. And so what I'd like to do is just pause in the superintendent's report to see if there's any questions from board members.
Can you unpresent so that I can potentially see more board members?
Yeah.
Oh, Gary, go ahead.
Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Friday cohorts.
Sorry, can you say it again, Gary?
Oh, I'm sorry. How do we determine which students are in the Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday cohorts? Sorry.
Yeah, they're currently it was organized by last name, alphabetical. So it was A through L, M through Z, or something like that. And so these now need to be kind of reconfigured in Skyward. And then we also, it was, I think, painstaking, and Beth had a lot to do with this, and secretaries in schools, knowing families. So if there are different last names in families, to make sure that those kids stay together so that their siblings aren't in different cohort days, and also trying to match that across school levels. So if there's a high school student and an elementary student, that they end up on the same cohort days, because a high school student, I'm imagining, is pretty helpful right now when their younger siblings are at home learning virtually.
Kristen?
Yeah, hi. So when we initially put this out there, and I believe Jeff can speak to this as well, I believe we had asked teachers alongside families, or they prefer virtual, hybrid, or in person. Would that stay the same? Because I'm hearing from a lot of families who are like, you know, do what you need to do, but I want my teacher to stay with us. And that's going to be a big concern for those kids that have been stayed an entire semester with one teacher, uprooting them because the majority of the class goes virtual. This is just something to consider as we're talking with the medical, and as we're talking with the return to school plan. Like, my family has to stay virtual this year. So it's something that needs to be considered. We're not the only ones, but I've heard from enough that it is a concern, and I'm supportive of as many questions getting answered before that January 4th meeting.
Okay, we'll work on it. There's we've done the best planning I think we can to try to keep teachers and kids together. There will be some shifts. It's not going to be perfect. Lots of the elementaries have within kind of a learning community, because lots of them are multi-age with multiple teachers, so that there's a teacher that's been identified as if when we hit phase 2, well, then you're going to be responsible for the virtual kids, so that that teacher's already connected to those kids. So that's a way to kind of split it up in secondary schools, and that's why we built Wednesday the way we did. They're going to have the same teachers, but now that teacher is going to be responsible for the kids in front of them and the kids online simultaneously. And that's the challenge in all of this, is that particular instructional model is not going to be easy for folks. And that's why I'm hoping it's short-lived.
Talk to me. I'm doing it currently, so just heads up.
Yep.
Noah?
I know that we had surveyed parents a while back about what their preference would be. My question is, with the amount of time that has passed, is there a reason to resurvey to determine if there's been anyone who's changed their minds one way or the other about what they would like to do, and to ensure that we're balancing how many kids we have on each day? I'd hate to be like, well, I know I said that I want to do in person, but now I don't. And so we have, a lopsided Monday, Tuesday versus Thursday, Friday, because we have more people who decided to stay virtual for one reason or another.
Yeah, we've talked about it. And I don't know that we need to do a full kind of resurvey, and maybe just the communication strategy that opens the window that says, if you want to change, here's your opportunity to do so. So rather than having to go through every single response again, we'll just attend to the ones that really want to make a change. So we got to talk a little bit more about that, because it's trying to get that done right now during the holiday time frame doesn't make sense, because people aren't going to be attending to that kind of information coming from us. So we would need to move really fast after January 4th. But I think you're right. I think to do some, you have an opportunity to change here, and I imagine some will go in both directions, that want to stay all virtual or want to come back in person.
Precisely. And really, for our hybrid to work, we have to make sure we can maintain that social distancing as much as possible. And so by making sure we're as even as we can be anyways in our classrooms if we're going back in person, so we can limit the transmission if we do have any infections that come in.
Yes.
Thanks, Noah. Potentially even there's a way to maybe, Marty, in Skyward, almost like a negative consent, like this was your choice as of this date. If your choice has changed, click here. If there's a way to communicate it that way and utilize some of the tools that we have, would maybe allow for a more quicker turnaround. Gary, did you have another comment?
Yeah, another question, 2 questions. So Marty, in your presentation, you had mentioned possibly a month after phase 2, moving into phase 4 and 5. So 2 questions I have related to that. One, is there a go, no-go decision date for determining phase 4 or 5? And if it's a go, how far after that decision would phase 4 and 5 come to be?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Gary. I don't have an answer yet. We just haven't thought that far into that particular moment, and we're trying to get into the phase 2 and 3. But my preference is that, like I just said, it's short-lived just because of the instructional challenge. I think that one I want to have some conversation with the health department around about at what point are they comfortable with us going from where we can actually do some social distancing to phase 4 and 5. There's no more social distancing. It's not a realistic expectation. And so I want some input from them on what they would be comfortable or what they would need to see in the data that would say, yeah, let's start making a shift. But I think we would want 2 weeks notice, ideally. But like I said earlier, it's not as challenging to shift from the 2-day-a-week cohort model to just regular school, right? Because we'll still have masks and all of those things, but that's not as difficult for all of us to make that move. It's just the decision point of when.
Gary, did you have a second question too?
No, Marty answered my other question.
Heather?
Will we start busing and transportation right away when we open, Marty, for anybody who's eligible for that transportation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that plan is ready to go.
Board members, any other comments before we move on to the next item on the superintendent's report?
I have a question in regard to when we are offering the virtual option for families. How are we determining what teachers will be handling virtual? Will it just be within their classroom, and then kids that are virtual will be just watching Zoom through the classroom, or is there going to be like a separate learning environment for them?
Yeah, so I think it's going to vary. I think some of this is going to be how teachers adapt to this reality. And we've talked with Phil Ertl, the superintendent in Wauwatosa, about this, and he said, and that's essentially kind of what we're doing is patterning after their experience. They bought a whole bunch of, now I'm going to forget the name, kind of camera that can be set up in the back of the room, and it essentially kind of follows the teacher. Right, so that students for teachers that are comfortable with that, and in Tosa they said a whole bunch of them wanted it and they adapted, and some of them didn't want a camera, and they were like, okay, then let's find a different way to figure out how we do this. So we've ordered a bunch of those cameras as one option. Another option that teachers are using when they have, they're trying to connect with kids in both realms, is that there's the kids that are on Zoom, and a student that's in the classroom face-to-face is responsible for monitoring the Zoom part of the class. So if a student in the Zoom class has a question, and then that student that has the laptop and can stop and say, Marty has a question about that, the way to get the teacher's attention into the virtual class room part of it. And then another option, and for some students, we're doing it now, where they actually learn asynchronously. And so new content is recorded that will continue. And then students can access it, at their own kind of timeline. So those are the three examples of what we know how this might look. And that's really all secondary, because elementary have designed their schedules where, again, there's multiple teachers associated with a group of kids. So then they have a kind of a teacher that's going to be more the virtual teacher as we move into phase 2 for elementary.
And then what kind of support are we going to be offering our teachers that are, extremely afraid to go back in person? Yeah. Are we going to what kind of choices and options are we going to have? What if we have 75% of our staff says they don't want to go back in the buildings? Just hypothetically speaking, what are we?
Yeah, my sense is it won't be anywhere near 75%.
I hope not.
Some of this is just helping people work through the fear and anxiety. And again, from our neighbors, one of the things that happens as you make the shift to hybrid or distance learning, the first time there's a positive case in a classroom, right away, every teacher wants to know who it is. Every parent wants to know how far was my kid away from that kid. And so the anxiety level is going to be high for a while. And as we work through contact tracing and we work through the communication strategies, that starts to calm down when they see there's good mitigation practices in place. We're enforcing them consistently. We're communicating and following up quickly. That helps people adapt and adjust. What we have put in place already is I think it was 17 teachers that were approved for telecommuting. And so we're now going to finish up hiring kind of their underfill or their substitute or their EA that's going to be physically in their classroom while they continue to teach virtually. And that was to address kind of either individual health or family health needs, so that whole fear factor. And that's about what we figured we could afford within the CARES funding, because essentially we're hiring 2 adults for 1 group of kids. And then our attorney has advised that we continue to voluntarily follow the leave or work from home opportunities under FMLA, FFCRA, and ADA that are due to expire on December 31st. And so we've been talking about how we might be able to voluntarily do that to support staff. But if we're going to bring kids back, we got to have staff come back too. And so for some of us, it'll be scary. But hopefully as we kind of learn forward, that starts to dissipate a bit.
I have one more question. Since we have our own health clinic, have you been having any discussions on vaccines and the ability to go through our own clinic and maybe to be able to fast track because we do have that option?
I have not. I've talked to Zach over the months about testing and some of those things, but then when the big sites were open in West Allis, that didn't seem to be a huge need, but I would bring that up. He's also on our returning to school committee, so I'll touch base with him separately, what he's hearing as a way to start getting vaccine distribution closer to home. I'd love that.
I think that would be a great idea if that was something that we could benefit from, having our own health clinic to get vaccines to our wonderful teachers sooner rather than later.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers.
Okay. All right, we can move on then. Special Ed.
Good. Yeah. So thanks to the board for the engagement around that. It's really wild to try to figure it all out, but we're going to keep moving forward. So in the legislative update, this one's real quick. The Senate committee structure has been announced, and the Senate Majority Leader-elect Devin LeMahieu announce the 2021-22 Senate Committee. So the Senate Committee on Education is Senator Alberta Darling is the chair. Now Senator Kathy Bernier is the vice chair, and Senator Steve Nass is a member on that committee. And they'll be important as this is a budget cycle year, and there's nothing new at the federal level right now. And then in recognitions for December 14th, big shout out to our high school theater department, proving where there's a will, there's a way. The 39 Steps was performed in radio play format and live streamed to the comfort of ticket holder homes. So applause goes to the director, Jordan Pollard, and tech director, Scott Gurmshed. The producer was Zach Beeksma, and our cast members, Brian Jakubiak, Harrison Stauffacher, Patrick Kirkpatrick, Mariah Schaumburg, Melina Maru, Natalia Zuniga, Emily Higgins, Olivia Gross, and Jalen Smith. And then our learning community, special thanks to all students and staff that are working to make a difference in the lives of others during this holiday season. Student clubs have organized food drives and toy drives, and staff have made food baskets and organized virtual shopping experiences for children. And we just feel we're truly blessed by the spirit of giving that goes on even during such an odd holiday season. And then I want to share, let's see now, I got to share a screen again, I think. Deidre, how am I going to do this?
I can share screen and I have it up.
Go ahead. So what Deidre and the team did, and Shelly Strasser put together just a little highlight reel, or I think it's called a Sizzle Reel, of the Target shopping experience. And we just wanted to share that this evening. So we talked about it last Monday, but now you can see what it actually looks like.
And based on the format of this one, it does go quickly, which is why we made sure Suzette reloaded the document up to board books, and it'll also be in the notes for anyone who wants to watch it again.
Target Experience COVID edition. Thanks for putting that together, Deidre. And I think that's a great place to end the superintendent's report.
It's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that today too. I'm sorry, Marty, was the end of the updates then?
Yes, that's the end of the report.
Great, thank you. All right, we move on to item 8, the board president's report, taking a look at the board calendar. So today, December 14th, obviously we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Immediately following, we have a college and career readiness workshop on school improvement plans and panorama results. And then immediately following, we do have a closed session. Winter break is from December 21st through January 1st, and classes will resume on January 4th. Hope everyone stays safe and enjoys their holidays. On Monday, January 4th at 6 p.m., we will have a special Board of Education meeting, as Dr. Lexman just alluded to, on the reopening of school plan. Monday, January 11th at 6 p.m., a regular Board of Education meeting, and then a financial stability and efficiency workshop on open enrollment seats and overview of facility capacity study, the CIP list, the long-range facility master plan, and the overview of the FACT meetings. On Monday, January 18th at 6 o'clock, we do have a workshop on our Neola policy review. And Monday, January 25th at 6 p.m., we do have a regular Board of Education meeting. Do any board members have any community updates? Kristen?
I apologize for not knowing specifics, but I know I saw Central the other day doing a food drive, and it looked like a wonderful outing from the community, and what a wonderful job by the students to continue volunteering and making ways to do it safely.
will then move on to our consent agenda for the evening. There are 4 items. Item 9.1, the approval of minutes from the December 7th, 2020 meeting. The employment summary, 9.3, the supplementary contracts, and item 9.4, the financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated? Heather?
Yes, can you please separate 9.2?
9.2. All right, so we would then look, does anybody else need anything else separated out? Now we would look for a motion on 9.1, 9.3, and 9.4.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, and then we would look for a motion on 9.2.
Move to approve.
Second.
And then Heather, you will be recusing or
Yes.
using yourself for voting, okay? So item 9.2 has been moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, passes. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our action items for this evening. Item 10.1 is the 2021-2022 budget calendar. Ms. Windler, I know you're on here somewhere. I saw you at some point.
I am right here.
There you are.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I just want to quickly reiterate a thank you once again to our community for engaging in tonight's meeting. This next item is probably the most straightforward one on our agenda tonight, and we are just approving the budget calendar. It is very straightforward and maintains the same order every year. So our board reviewed it in a workshop last week. The biggest factor and the biggest unknown this year in the budget calendar is we are going into the first year in a state biennial budget. The state puts out a 2-year budget calendar, and this is the first year. So that's always the toughest because we don't know our budget factors until later in the game. And this is probably going to be one of the more arduous state budgets. So we will and are already monitoring all information from the state as we work through this year's budget. The first item on the agenda or on the calendar for the 21-22 budget is a March 8th workshop on enrollment projections, revenue limit calculations, and budget projections. So we'll continue then to work through the spring and the summer and the fall from a few workshops with the board and until we have narrowed in on a balanced budget for the 21-22 fiscal year. And then the board will adopt the final budget on Monday, October 25th. And the budget calendar is linked to board book for anyone who is interested in reviewing the details. So that is all I have. Any questions?
All right, then board, we will look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final comments or questions on the board calendar or the budget calendar? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, calendar passes. All right. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank
All
you.
right, item 10.2 on the action item this evening is the 2020-2021 base wage increase for teachers. Dr. Lexman and Mr. Thompson.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Lexman, I don't know if you're going to start or if you...
Yeah, I'll jump in just at the high level here. So for the board and folks that are watching, so we are required to go into base wage negotiations for increases for our teachers to the base wage salaries. And it's limited up to a maximum, which is the consumer price index that gets set annually. And for this year, the maximum is 1.81, if I remember this correctly. And so that's a process that Jeff Thompson, our director of HR, has been working with the representatives for the Teacher Association as well as our Educational Assistant Association. And Jeff, then I'll turn it over to you to talk through just a little bit of the detail about how we work through this and where we're recommending that the board supports.
Very good. Thank you very much. So basically the recommendation that we have for tonight is that the board approve the base wage increase as tentatively negotiated. So conversations between our district and the union, it's been ongoing for about a month now with various meetings and just a lot of discussion back and forth. And so the recommendation is for approval of that tentative base wage increase. And basically the purpose is to approve the tentative negotiated base wage agreement, which Dr. Lexman mentioned is 1.81%. If approved, would be effective from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. The distribution of the 1.81% would be for all returning teachers from the 1920 school year. And then there is in addition to the teachers that were returning from last school year. And the addition is that we'd also include 17 newly hired teachers this year that came in and signed at our base wage salary. And so those 17 teachers would be included in the CPI increase as well. And that is the recommendation and the purpose. If it does get approved, then we have a plan in place to make sure that the agreement gets signed in this remote kind of Zoom world that we're living in right now. And that would occur tomorrow.
Board member questions for Mr. Thompson?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions?
I have
All
to.
those- I'm sorry, Bill?
I have to abstain.
Okay. No additional comments or questions. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. All right, move on to our next item, item 10.3, the 2020-2021 base wage increase for educational assistants. Mr. Thompson, you're up again.
Yeah, so same process again. Been having conversations for about a month. Again, it's the recommendation that the board approve the tentative agreement that was negotiated. Again, this is for the 1.81% for all educational assistants that are returning from the 1920 school year to this year. And then we also have 4 new hires that are also added. And very similar to the conversation that we just had, we had 4 educational assistants that were hired this year at our base hourly pay rate. And so the conversation includes those 4 educational assistants as well. And so once again, just asking the board to approve a 1.81% increase for our educational assistant employee group.
Questions or comments for Mr. Thompson?
Move to
Outlook for
approve.
motion?
Second.
Sorry, no, I talked over you. I need little hand marker so I know who's going to go next. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Recusal? Were you raising your hand for that?
Yes.
You're abstaining on this one as well. Okay, thank you. I missed that one before. All right, that has passed then. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to item 10.3, the 2020-2021. No, I just did that one, sorry. 10.4, the 2020-2021 base wage increase for administrators, at-will secretarial maintenance, and custodial staff. Dr. Lex.
Yep, thank you. So this item is all of the other employee groups, right? So, and these are groups that are not represented, meaning there's no union or association that the members belong to. Because if they're represented employees, then we're required to do a negotiation process like we just described, or Jeff just described with teachers, and then separately with educational assistants. But what we have done in the past is, as teachers and EAs, the board approves their base wage increases, then we have traditionally offered the same to all of the other employee groups. So again, it's the 1.81. Last year, we actually did it in a little different order. We started the year with this particular increase approved, and we just got a little bit ahead of the teachers and EAs, and we wanted to try to move all of this together this year, and we think that does make sense. And again, we're trying to see if the board will support this, because we do have a plan to get this distributed in the last payroll, and that has some impacts for taxes that are helpful for us. So if you have more questions about that, Caitlin's ready to respond to those questions.
Not really a question, but more of a comment. I had some communications with Dr. Lexman and Jeff, and would like to see in the future, if possible, to separate this one out into 2 groups: admin at will, and then the custodial, secretarial, and maintenance in a separate one. because the types of work they do is so significantly different. And if something comes up that we want to maybe discuss one group or the other, I think that should be brought forward.
Okay. Yep, we can certainly do that, Gary, going forward.
Questions on 10.4? Now we look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, good. Thank you, everyone. All right, and as we noted in the changes and modifications, item 10.5 has been tabled until January. We'll then move on to our workshop for this evening, item 11.1, which is our college and career readiness workshop on school improvement plans and panorama results. And Deidre, I see you on there as well, so I know you'll be bringing up our guests and beginning to start this conversation, so thank you very much.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I will reiterate the comments that I appreciate is the number of people who are here tonight, and I'm thankful that so many of them have stuck around for this part of the workshop. And that's really important to share some of the things that we do in our classrooms and our schools, no matter what the format. So we're excited for that opportunity tonight. I have invited some guests this evening, as Bill mentioned at our workshop with Melissa around some of our workshops, that we like the ones where we can do a lot of interaction, which we have yet to figure out exactly how to replicate on this setting, because we can't go into small breakout rooms or the meetings aren't open to the public and all of those things. So instead, we're gonna have a panel of Nick Burr, who is our lead school counselor, and he also heads up the oversight of Panorama for us. He had gotten to be quite enamored with the tool when we first purchased it, and therefore he has been willing to take on quite a bit of that work in his role as the lead counselor and then just as a vested member of our team. And then he's invited some staff. We have some teachers, principals, dean of students with us tonight to just share then how they use that data in the work that they do every day and why this has been such a powerful tool for us. And then after that short presentation, we have 3 of our schools with us tonight, and we're going to actually go through and model for you how we do a feedback protocol, both at our leadership team and with our students in our classrooms as they're doing projects and as they're getting ready for project ideas. So we're going to model that for you tonight so that you'll have the opportunity to know what that feels like to be an audience member when you're giving kind, specific, and helpful feedback on somebody's presentation. So in an effort to hopefully make it a little bit more interactive tonight. So we have 2 kind of separate things going on. And with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Burr.
All right, thank you, Deidre. I appreciate it. I just had to unmute myself. It's nice to have such a large audience tonight because I am, as Deidre will let you know, always excited about Panorama. And the more people that know about it, I think the more people that fall in love with it. So I'm the lead school counselor for the school district, and I'm also an intermediate counselor at Frank Lloyd Wright, in addition to being the coordinator of Panorama. So Panorama is a data system, but what's so neat about it is it's much more than just giving you a bunch of numbers. And as a school counselor, as much as I embrace data today, I certainly didn't become a school counselor because I love numbers and data. So that's my full disclosure. So when I learned, but as we want to become better educators, the more we can embrace data to help it improve decisions that we make, the better educators we will be. So as I learned about Panorama and all that it could do, I fell in love with it, not because I love data. I fell in love with it because I have never loved data. But this makes it just so easy, so understandable, and so user-friendly. So basically what Panorama does is it's an information system that takes information that we already have, but it synthesizes it so that we can make it more useful. So some examples would be, as we want to do many interventions with students, it's a platform where we can input interventions, whether they be major tiered academic interventions or simple interventions in terms of trying to make students improve in certain areas. Every school and every student can have their information entered into Panorama, and different faculty who share this student can view it. So no one has to be wondering like, what did somebody do to help this student? What did somebody do to help to support the student? as students transition to different levels, that's also helpful too, because when we want to intervene in reading, or we want to intervene with attendance or academics or a whole myriad of things, or social emotional learning, which we'll talk about in a little bit, then the next school can see what types of steps were taken. Therefore, it really cuts down on a lot of the learning curve for faculty, and we can be more efficient. We can learn from what was done before, and we can make better decisions for what that's going to help that student. Also, it's just a place where, when it comes to attendance data or grade data, it's all in one place, so you can do a lot of searches. So here's what I mean for that. So as a school counselor, a lot of times we're looking to see how we can support students in attendance. So instead of just searching one by one who may have an attendance concern, or for that matter, who we want to recognize for outstanding attendance, I can do a search, like who are the students that have attended almost every day or every day, and I can have them all together. So when I want to recognize those students, it's much easier. On the flip side, if I want to identify students that have some attendance concerns, this system will pull out whatever student I want. Maybe it's a student that's missed X number of days. And so I can do a filter search for exactly what I want. It also breaks down different data that we have by gender and cultural difference, so we can make sure that we're doing equity work and making sure that basically what that means is we want to serve all students and give all students equal opportunities. So there's just an endless amount of things. So instead of talking about it forever, I'm going to show you a few things, and then I'm going to turn it over to, as Deidre said, 4 different staff members who are here tonight, and they're going to talk specifically about how they utilize it in their building. Because it's nice to hear about a system, but it's even nicer to hear, okay, what are you doing in the building? Like, how do you use it? How does it help you to support students? So that's what some things that you'll hear tonight. So I'm hoping I have sharing ability here. Okay. So one of the things that we do is we do an SEL, which stands for Social Emotional Learning Survey. So we survey our students twice every year. And what it does is it gives us a snapshot for what types of social emotional learning supports that we need for our students, all right? And so social emotional learning, we want to take advantage of natural opportunities in the classroom to support students in things that are going to make it useful for them to be successful in society and to be successful in their job someday. So being aware socially, having perseverance, being able to regulate yourself emotionally. Those aren't just fluffy terms. Those are things that the real world and jobs and businesses are going to be expecting of their employees. So when we can measure, hey, overall, how are our students doing? Then we can better plan for steps for learning and interventions and support to increase students' ability to succeed in those areas and to excel in those areas. So again, they can succeed and excel someday in the future. So I'm not going to go into every single area, but here's some of the areas that we measure, and we break it down by secondary and elementary. So this is our elementary students. So when it comes to measuring their effort and how they perceive it, 74% of kids view that as a strength, all right? And so grit would be perseverance, or ability to be able to keep going when things are challenging. So 51% is much lower than we want it to be. So we recognize that not all of our students are exactly where they want them to be, and we don't want to put our head in the sand. We want to look and see where do we need to give that support. So, and traditionally emotional regulation is one of our weakest areas, and we want that to be stronger. And it is something that we do struggle with. And speaking of struggling, my computer is struggling too. All right. So emotional regulation is defined as a student or anybody's ability to be able to regulate their emotions. In other words, to stay calm and to stay focused when their emotions might be running high. Like right now, my emotions are running high because I'm excited about Panorama, but I'm able to regulate myself and still be calm enough to explain this in a very succinct manner. At least I hope I am. I can't get a lot of feedback from the audience because I don't see many of you. But what we do is then we can break it down. There's a lot of information. I'm going to go through it to what's most useful for you. So forgive me if I'm going through this quickly. Anyone that wants more information can certainly contact me individually.
Nick,
So,
I'm going to jump in just on one quick part.
Yep.
The scales at the top that Nick showed you, and then as well this one, that one right there, thank you, actually show how our district compares nationally to other districts across the nation that all take this same survey. So for this one, we are below the national average when it comes to this particular skill. So that's the other piece of it. Panorama has helped us to know what other partners out there are using the tool so that we can also learn from them as well. The only one that doesn't have a normed national number to it is the curiosity scale, as that's a scale that they actually made specific for us in West Allis, West Milwaukee with all of our deeper learning work. We wanted to figure out, are our kids more curious about going out into the world and figuring things out for themselves, as that aligns to our mission and our vision, and a lot of the work within our strategic plan. So that one doesn't have a national normed ranking, but the other 5 categories that we measure do.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. Important stuff. If I were to click into different areas here, and we don't have time to do that tonight, we can break it down by grade level, like other different grades that are struggling more than others. And then we can, that's part of, we're a detective sometimes trying to figure out why that might be. We can break it down by different demographics, including gender, cultural differences, things such as that. We can also look at each question specifically that was asked of the students in these different categories, and we can see how many responded favorably. And then we can even break it down by each question into different subcategories and demographics. So how does that help us? Well, again, we look at which areas of our concern, and then we give that support. So how do we give that support? Well, we have different social emotional lessons, but also teachers can just do a lot of impromptu lessons. What I mean by impromptu is they can have some ready-made lessons that are accessible for them that will help students get better at this particular category. So for instance, all these different categories right here would be like, conversation starters, general guidelines for discussion within the classroom that will help address some of these things. Because we don't want to just know, all right, where are we weak? We want to look at how we can improve some of those things also. All right. Again, I know I'm going through this quickly, but it kind of gives people at least a snapshot. The other thing that we wanted to do, and as we looked at how students are doing in virtual learning, and with the pandemic, we want to look at students' well-being. All right, so we measured that in the latest survey. So it comes under 3 different categories: supportive relationships, positive feelings, and challenging feelings. I'm just going to go into the supportive relationships, and 83% of our students indicated that they do have positive, supportive relationships in their lives, which is fantastic. And so what we really want to look at too specifically is, what about those relationships in school? So you can see under this category, one of the questions is, do you have a teacher or other adult from school who you can count on to help you no matter what? 84% of our students indicated yes to that answer. Now, we would like it to be 100%, all right? But nonetheless, that's a high number. It speaks well for our district that kids are developing relationships with students in terms of being supported academically, and teachers are reaching out to do whatever they can to help students, and students are feeling that that's the case. But we can break this down, and I'm not going to do it tonight, by each school. So each school can see what their numbers are. And for instance, we want to improve this number even higher. So what schools can do is they can look at this data, they can make school improvement goals, and then those goals can be measured at the end of the year to see if the numbers went up. So I'll give you an example of what we're doing at Frank Lloyd Wright, and then I'll turn it over to some of the other staff members. We have a group called the Hope Squad, and those students got together last week, and they brainstormed information they want to share with our staff about how we can bring that number up even higher. Sometimes we don't have to sit here and scratch our heads and say, how can we better form relationships and support students and have it so they don't feel alone. We just have to ask the students, and they give us some great information. And so, just as I mentioned last week at Frank Lloyd Wright, those students give us some great information. And so we're going to be sharing that with our staff, and we're going to be implementing some of those things, and then we're going to be measuring our numbers to see if they've gone up at the end of the year.
One thing about the wellness survey, because it's the first time we ever did it, this is our baseline data. And so we did it this year in the fall. We'll do it again in the spring. So we don't really, this one doesn't help us know whether or not these were better or worse prior to virtual learning, or if they're consistent with what we've seen in, across both settings of school. So that's the one thing that it won't tell us, just because this is the first time we've administered that one.
And I guess to kind of piggyback at and end my segment and turn it over to the staff, that's part of what we learn with Panorama is all the things that it can do. So, and what we can do with it, and we're still learning. So I just talked to another school district last week who's using it, and I learned something that they're doing with it that never occurred to me. So it's basically it's information, and like any information, you have to figure out what can you do with it, because information is only useful if you know how to use it to help support your students. And so we don't know everything we can do with Panorama, but we're learning more and more students or more and more schools are really embracing it so that they can support their learners. So at this point in time, we have 4 different faculty from different schools. From going to be 2 from Hoover, from Central, and from Frank Lloyd Wright, who are going to talk about how they use it. So I'm going to start with Krista Arnold, if you want to be the first on the docket to talk a little bit about how you embrace Panorama at Frank Lloyd Wright as a classroom teacher.
So I am Krista Arnold from Frank Lloyd Wright, and I have been there for 4 years. This is my 4th year. Last year, I was put into math intervention role in the building. So we had always tracked our data for math probes for tier 2 and tier 3 using Google Sheets, and had to make sure that everybody had access to these Google Sheets. And there was always somebody that didn't have access, and you'd find out 3 months after the, and it was just a big deal. And Nick had come to me and said, you know what, we have Panorama, why don't we try using this? And I said, okay, I'll look into it. And I'm opposite of Nick, I love data. So I was all in on it and found out how we can create intervention plans and everybody can see them. I didn't have to make sure that, the counselors could see it, or that our admin team could see it, or the teachers the next year. Everybody in the district just has access to it, which was amazing. So with that, it went along with training on, what do you add in here? What do you not? Because everybody has access to it. And trying different things. And Julia Niles was awesome over at Frank Lloyd Wright working with me, seeing how we wanted to make it consistent. So each week we would do a probe, we would enter that score in, we couldn't automatically see a graph that would go up or down where we were creating the graph in Google Sheets. So a lot of times it didn't get created because when you're trying to enter information in for 100 kids that you're seeing and still trying to provide intervention for, it got kind of put on the wayside. So those graphs are in there. This morning I had a meeting because now I am in the STEAM community teaching 6th through 8th grade math. And I met with our TI person and Miss Niles to talk about 6 weeks have gone by. Is there anybody we should dismiss? And it was super easy for me to pull it up on my screen. They pulled it up on their screen. We could talk about these kids and see the actual data without having to do any additional work. My group also in STEAM puts comments in. So if I'm calling a parent saying this kid is doing a great job and another teacher wants to call that same parent, it might be, let's wait a day. Otherwise parents start going, wait, why are you all calling on the same day? Which we've had happen in years past when it just is coincidence, but now we can see who's calling, who's making those contacts, who's making homework plans, things like that. So we just are tracking it. And like Nick said, I wish I had more time to learn more that it can do, because it is an amazing program and I would love to get my team more involved in it. I was lucky to have the time last year to really investigate what it can do. So just trying to share with them how we can use it better for tracking students.
And I'll jump in on that a little bit. Thank you so much, Krista. Is that we've had several sessions that are professional development opportunities as well for people to kind of dive in. There's webinars, there's all of those pieces. And as we've done professional development a little differently this year to add some more planning time, there's been a bit of a hiccup in trying to get tools like this really, to have whole sessions on that. So we have tons of resources for staff, but this is the year that it is. And as we've heard many times tonight, we're so thankful for all of the work our teachers have put in, but sometimes that means they don't have that extra time to kind of explore something on their own right now. So we are working on that one as we speak. The other nice part about it, and I know some other people will talk about that as well, is we bought an additional, so originally we just had the surveys, and then we decided to purchase the student success platform, which is where it allows us to keep track of academic behavior, attendance, and the SEL data all in one dashboard. So at any given moment, we could pull up a whole school, a teacher could pull up a class by third hour, A principal could pull up all the boys in 6th grade. They could pull up all the students with disabilities who are in 4th grade. And you can get a bird's eye view of their grades, their attendance, their behavior, referrals to the office, as well as how they scored how they scored themselves on the SEL surveys. And so being able to get that quick peek snapshot at that is so helpful when we're trying to be sure that we have the right resources and support going on for families. If a student is in an intervention for math or for reading and they're making all this progress, but yet their grades are still indicating that math and reading are a struggle for them, it allows us that opportunity to sit down and talk about that. Like, where is the disconnect between the student gaining skills at the rate this one side of it tells us, and yet they're underperforming in the classroom? And then they may have scored themselves really low in classroom effort. Well, now we've got a team around that student to say, okay, how can we best support you? The other thing that it helps us to work on are the students who are sometimes green, bright green. It's got a red, yellow, green system. So they could be bright green for grades, bright green for academic tests, because the MAP scores all get loaded into the platform as well. Bright green for behavior. They're not getting in any trouble in the office. They're attending school every single day. So it's that quiet student who then may say on the survey, I don't feel so great about school. And this is our way to also look at that student and say, okay, what additional supports do we need to provide to a student who maybe is going along with school just fine and therefore performing on these other markers, but is now reaching out to us to say, but I'm not feeling that great about school. So let's talk about that, or about myself in school. So then we can start looking to provide some support for those students as well.
Okay. Mr. Hernandez from Central, if you could talk about how you use it.
Absolutely. Would I be able to share my screen? Okay. So I was able to create a demo, use the demo. So just to kind of show you how I use it. My primary role with monitoring attendance and working with families and students with their attendance issues. So on a daily basis, I open up a Panorama. I love Panorama. This really is like the anchor of what I do. And so every morning I'll open it up and I can select the 2 groups that I really try to focus a lot of my attention on, which are the at-risk and critical students with regards to attendance. And then I basically shuffle it or sort it from worst to the least. And then these are the students that I definitely reach out to and their families. And it also allows me to monitor any progress with their attendance. I'm able to organize groups to help me track my students or monitor my students that I work closely with a little bit more efficiently. So for example, just for this demo, I created a group and I have a group for open enrollment students. So I can click on those with one click and I can see all 100, I think we have 120 odd open enrollment students in our school. So I can monitor those students because they're listed here and I can see where they are at with their attendance, with their academics, their behaviors, their SEL, etc.
Sean, I'm just going to clarify one thing for everyone. I wasn't sure if everybody heard Sean say that at the beginning. This is not actual student data.
Nope.
This is a fake account that just demonstrates for everybody student data. We do not have any confidential information being shared publicly and recorded for posterity tonight, which is why it's a slightly more awkward for a couple of them, because if they were pulling up their own natural groups they use, it would be a little quicker and simpler. But this is actually just a fake account so that we're not sharing anything that's too confidential.
Yeah, sorry if I didn't mention that. But it allows me to work with these students and these families much more efficiently and work with teachers as well, because as one of the other presenters mentioned, I can click on a student. So for example, Miss Cynthia Leinhart, and I can put in any interventions that I have done with her and see any interventions that other teachers have had with her, for example. And the dates are a little wonky because of the demo format here. It shows that I entered everything as Miss Evelyn on the 14th today. So the dates, whenever I enter something for a student, it would go in as a date. Up here, I don't have to put the 1/1/20. So I can put in here that I placed a student on an attendance contract. Prior to that, on 12/21, I had a second meeting with the student. Prior to that, on 11/15, I spoke with the parent and student and placed them on a check-in checkout. So that way the teachers can also see what is Mr. Hernandez doing with these students that I may have referred to him or that are on his radar. How are we helping these students? So
Sean, if you can scroll down a little bit as well, it's also hugely helpful that you can see exactly what their grades were across courses and what the GPA is and the class rank and all of those pieces. Although we have all of that in Skyward, this overlays it all in one snapshot. And for the attendance, it's especially helpful when you're working with families because it shows the attendance in a grid like this. So a family may say, well, you know, he was only tardy 4 or 5 times. And look, he was only absent 2 or 3 times. But when you look at the grid like this, that shows how many days it was in a particular month or how many times are we tardy to particular classes in the day, it becomes like very jarring to students and parents to say, wow, that adds up a lot quicker than I was thinking it does when I see it on a grid like that.
Absolutely. And this screen, this is so powerful to share with parents and students when I have a student in my office and I can show them the screen and show them what their grades are across the board. And when they come down to here, it really does hit home. They, like Deidre said, they really see, wow, as a percentage, I've only been to school 73% of the time, and some of them are much worse. What I really like about Panorama, and this is really how the power that I get out of using it, is this 20 days present. I really like this because this shows that this student for the past 20 days of school has been present 65% of the time. And when it comes to working out a plan or a contract with a student, this is the number that I focus on. I say, okay, little Johnny, if you can improve that attendance, bring it up from 20% to 80%, which is, we kind of want you there, right? And then you over the next 3 weeks, I can monitor that, I can watch that, and see if they've met that goal. And for me, it's not so much reaching that 80% that we set out in the contract. It's just trying to get them to have that in their head that, wow, I got to improve. And then I look for that growth, right, whatever it may be, and then try to work with families as well. So I love the data that it provides. Sorry, Nick. But it's a fantastic tool. I love it.
Thank you. Just adding to that also, I know Mr. Hernandez works with the high school, and a lot of our high school coaches and coaches and advisors at all different schools can put everybody and their team or their club in one place. So instead of searching, one by one for each student, trying to pull up all the different data points for each student, you can create a group that includes every member of your team or club. And once that group is created, the advisor or the coach, all they need to do is click on the group and boom, their whole team, their whole club appears. And you can see by color coding next to each name, if there's any concerns with grades or attendance or whatever. And so coaches and advisors can get that information in just a fraction of a second. Instead of spending, an hour checking each student one by one and all the things with it, they can literally get the information they need in about 10 seconds, and they can see it on a color chart and see what jumps out at them right away. So it really makes for efficiency. But then more importantly, that club advisor or that coach then can act upon it. So they can be much more efficient in intervening with their players or with their members to help them improve, because we want to ultimately have kids participate and be involved, but they have to be meeting the expectations, and this really helps with that. So we are going to then end with Helena Taylor and Corey Sack at Hoover. So you guys are up next. Thank you.
Helena, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm going to talk a little bit about the teacher perspective at Hoover and how I use Panorama. I teach third grade this year, and Panorama has helped me this year look at past plans when I've had students who I have questions about. I was able to look in Panorama and see were they a part of an intervention? Were they receiving services, additional services like from a reading intervention or getting accelerated services from GCT? What did that look like? What were their scores on the MAPS assessment? And like Krista said, that information was really helpful because there's no hunting down people, previous teachers. There's really, it's very clear what was going on before. And then once you have a plan in place with the team, I'm able to go ahead and enter some data and then even make notes on my data so that when we come to the meeting, the team, when they ask me questions about the intervention I've provided for my student, I'm able to talk knowledgeably, but they can also see the notes right in the data I've collected. And I think Corey's going to talk a little bit more about the MTSS process.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and add one thing. Thanks so much, Helena. The other piece that's been nice is it's a place to keep evidence, right? Because we aren't doing some of the same standardized testing that we would normally do. And so evidence collection and what's the evidence we have of learning and of growth. The students reporting their own through the surveys is huge, right? Because they're telling us, here's where I'm doing really well, here's where I need some support from others, but also that we've got an avenue to start saying, hey, anecdotally, here's what we're seeing in the classroom when the student is really thriving, here's what we're seeing in the classroom when the student is struggling, and having a one spot to collect some of that evidence as well. Because without some of those, we say all the time, our kids are more than a data point. But then we have to be able to demonstrate that somewhere, and for the next teacher to know what that student is interested in and where the student is really successful helps us work towards that student empowerment as well. Because I know we've talked a lot about some of the interventions, but keeping a close eye on where students are ready to accelerate and where we need to intervene keeps us from creating some of those big gaps that we've seen over in the history of some of the work that we've done as well.
I'm the guy who made slides. So when I live in Panorama all day, it's like sometimes I feel like it's all I do is Panorama. But there are 4 real big things that I'm doing typically throughout the day. So the first thing is I'm able to check attendance. And like most everybody's kind of talked about is the ability to go in, see at a quick glance what's going on with attendance. But the nice thing is we're able to click on any of these little colors. Deidre talked about this before. So like that dark green, 77% are meeting the overall goal of coming to school 80% of the time. But if I click on that red spot there, it opens up, there would be names on the side, but confidentiality. So what it does is it opens up all the kids that are in that red area or have a certain percentage or below a certain percentage of coming to school. So I'm able to right away see who's in the red, who do we need to worry about. Over here on the side, you see that little flag there. That's a student that we already have on an asynchronous plan. We've met with the parent to talk about what barriers they're, coming and trying to figure out what plan we can put in place to help them be more successful with coming and participating with school more. And then I'm able to, if I click on a specific student, I'm able to pull up that screen that Sean was talking about before, where I can pull up exactly what days of the week they're not here. I can look if there are patterns to, like in some cases we can see like, oh, for whatever reason, he misses Tuesdays all the time. Like what's going on Tuesdays? And it allows us to make decisions based on, and it's just laid out in such a nice way. I mean, I get an attendance report from Skyward regularly, and when my counselor and my DLC and I go through it together, I literally have it up on one screen and then I've got panorama on the other screen so that I can see. So because this helps us like visually, like in a second, like, oh, yep, oh my God, after we had that home visit, look at how much better he's doing, or, you know. The second thing we use it for is our MTSS plans, where we're able to document the intervention plans, monitor progress, and keep track of all the plans that a student's had from whenever they first went into Panorama. So here is an example of, if you go in, you can see all the strategies they've used with this particular student, when the plan was started, when the plan is expected to end. If there was data on this particular plan for every single week, you would see that going on. So right away, you can see what is all being done. And then when I click on that, I can also see a graph of when you see that data plotted in for each week, they kind of show you like what the trend is for what is happening here. So here, the dotted line is where we'd like to see the student is increasing. So when we have our progress monitoring meeting, we're able to sit here and say, okay, something about the strategies we're using isn't working. So we're able to go, okay, what should the new goal be? And what should we, incorporate next time to work better for this student? It really allows us to visually see. It really helps. Being virtual, we've been able to have parents on a little bit more easily, so they can see our screens and see exactly like where it's going, what the goal was. And this has made it so much easier to communicate with parents about like what's going on, instead of being on the phone, or, in some cases in the past, parents haven't been able to come to the meetings. So they're participating and being able to see this in a more user-friendly format, I think. 3, Sean talked about this as well, call logs. So we're able to monitor and document communication, actions taken, and interventions tried. Along the kind of left side of the screen, and of course I took screenshots because of confidentiality, but in this particular student's case, this is a whole bunch of calls that I've made, left messages and called mom, and she was happy about something. But if a teacher does something and does like a quick intervention with a student, or moved their seat, or any of those little things that a teacher can do, all of that can be documented on the side for each of those students that they do it for. And so it's all there. So if we want to go in and we have a problem solving meeting about a student, we're able to see everything a teacher tried, all the communication that was made with a parent, to kind of document like, okay, well, you've tried all these different things. It really helps us inform us as to what plan we should make. If we're seeing that a whole bunch of different plans have been put in place by a teacher, and then we're looking at the student's SEL survey and we're like, oh, some of this isn't matching up, maybe the support needs to match this a little bit. It's a whole lot easier. Like every single person that works with the student has access to see this and can tell parents have been notified about X, Y, and Z. Teachers tried this. In some cases, it's the teacher tried something and it did work. So any other teacher can go in and see right away what's working and what hasn't, and what they can try themselves. And the fourth piece, from a principal's perspective, is monitoring the building kind of from an overview. So I'm able to see the whole school. If we had maps, we'd be able to see what our data was from our last testing, and we'd be able to see if there were any behavior concerns that I need to worry about, or, think about, reflect about, set goals around. But we have attendance and we have our SEL, but I'm also able to make those groups. This is just an example. This is the students that have a current MTSS plan, but what I can also do is I've made groups for each one of my classrooms. So it's really nice for me to be able to meet with a teacher, and we can look at trends, we can see what's going on, we can connect it back to their SLO. So it really allows me to kind of see what's going on in each class at just a quick glance, and kind of see what's going on. And it's fantastic in having conversations with teachers to allow them to reflect with the data right in front of them, make decisions together, and just have good conversation about what's going on in classrooms. So Panorama's really allowed us to dig, look from a very general perspective, but also really dig deep specifically into students and make that information ready in a very user-friendly way at your fingertips for anyone that works with them.
Yeah, and I'll just add something to that. This used to be information that we housed in about 4 different spots. So if I was a teacher looking to say, hey, what really works for the student and how can I best support this student? I might have had to go into one platform here and one platform there and one platform here and one platform there. The likelihood that that poor teacher is going to have the kind of time that it would take to do all of those things and then be able to put it all together in a picture just wasn't realistic. That's not something that we have time to do during the day. And if we did have the time to do that, there's way better things we could do with all of that time. So this way, it just captures all of that for them in a snapshot. And the fact that the student is a big part of the process where they're telling us, hey, I don't feel very curious at school. And then the teacher saying, oh, he seems bored in his classes. Well, he told us that already. Right? He told us he wasn't feeling really curious at school. Let's see what we can do to try to figure those pieces out in the classroom. And so it's driven by, first and foremost, like what the students tell us in those surveys that they're feeling about some of their performance at school. And then the rest of the data either aligns to that or it doesn't. And that tells us a whole lot about the students and where we need to be pushing forward and where we have kids ready for things that are new and different, and how they're communicating all of that with us. So it's been hugely helpful for those pieces as well. Any questions about Panorama while we have our teachers and Principal and Nick here with us? And Dean, Sean.
Oh, go
So
ahead,
with
Heather.
With the survey that you guys do with the students, when do you do it and how often?
We do it 2 times a year, September and late April, early May. And that really, it helps us to do goal setting too, when we see what results are in the spring, and then schools can identify what are areas of concern and put in some plans. So for instance, examples of that would be, like I said, at Frank Lloyd Wright, we've asked students for their input on different areas. And then we have different lessons that are being done. And so the whole idea is then taking that baseline and trying to improve that data by the end of the year. Schools can also, they can, if they want to make a special survey in the middle of the year, they can. So for instance, last year, Mitchell School, I don't remember what it was, but there was a particular question on the SEL survey that they really wanted to make sure that they were addressing and improving. So they asked for a survey just on that one particular area in the middle of the year, so they can kind of get some progress during the year. So different options that schools have.
So
And
with
just to
that
add,
particular-
oh, sorry, Heather, to add one more thing to that, Panorama also has an equity survey that talks about how inclusive our classrooms are and how inclusive kids feel in our classrooms. We haven't added that one yet because we have plenty of data to work through. And as we're learning the system more and more, we never want to ask questions that we aren't prepared to respond to just yet. So we're doing a lot of our foundational work with our equity work, like we've talked about in workshop before. And then at some point, we'll also add that survey. So it adds a layer to kind of some of what we're learning about how our kids are feeling about school.
So you said you can do a special survey. Can they choose to do this exact survey more than just those 2 times? I mean, we know kids can have a bad day. I would just be concerned, like beginning of the school year, you throw a survey at me and I'm not doing this. This is so stupid, or just, negative in it, like, can we do it? If you kind of read a kid, can you say, hey, we're going to have this student take it one more time just to see how he feels?
Yeah, and you bring up a very excellent point in the sense that surveys are only as good as they are accurate, or as effort and diligence that the student put into it. So we've elected to do it twice a year just because it does take some time. But the answer to your question is yes. If a school wanted to do one in the middle, they could. And also, as we have a window of when the survey is given. So during that window, a particular teacher could have a student retake a survey if they feel that they weren't ready or didn't, take it with due diligence. So there is some opportunity to be able to correct some of those concerns.
I know in our community also, being 6th through 8th grade, we didn't have them all take it at the same time. They took it with balance lit so they could help read the questions to them also. And if a student is in a place where they're not going to do well on that, then we don't have them do it that day. I'm sure other teachers across the district do it that way too. It's not like you have to all do it the exact same day. So it's kind of gauging when they should do it. And sometimes they do take better when they're with their special ed teacher, so they can actually read every one for them. And yeah, just kind of gauging the kids because we want to have the best results too, to see where they fall to.
Good question. Thank you.
It is also, Heather, a great question because it's why we don't survey kids in 4K through 2nd grade. Because the national response to the questions was a lot based on whether or not they liked your new haircut or your dress that day, whether they said school was perfect or not. So it is not super reliable data for kids under that age. And so that's why it starts at 3rd grade and moves its way up, because that's when, with all their research, Panorama felt they could get actual data that would not wane so drastically depending on the day and the kid's mood and all of those types of things.
Christine, I know you had your hand up, and then Kristen after that.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the representatives who use this tool in each of the schools that were represented today. Is there a representative in each of the schools, and is that just usually a teacher, or is it also like a lead counselor, or?
Yeah, there isn't a designated person in each school that's in charge of Panorama, but each, you know, we work to make sure that we're, you know, training each school. For instance, you know, we went to school by school last year and met with their administrative and student services team. So I guess as a general answer to your question, that administrative and student services team are making sure that they are communicating, you know, updates and information and how to use the tools. And they might identify a teacher that, you know, can do some type of presentation or staff development at faculty meetings. So, you know, it's different in each school, but in general, it's student services and administration team is kind of responsible for making sure that information gets out.
And we have usage reports. So if a school wasn't using it at all, we'd be able to run that in a report and then check in with that team to say, hey, is there something you need us to help you with to develop in this? Typically what happens is you'll find 1 or 2 teachers who use it and fall in love with it and tell all their friends. That is usually when we get all kinds of interest in attending professional development, or are there any more resources? My friend is using this and it's cutting workload time in half, and it's a better resource for the student to be able to really help them thrive and grow. And so that tends to be our snowball effect, is when, you know, a couple of teachers glom onto it and then they really want to expand. But every single teacher in our district has had some kind of training on it. And then you'll see in the school improvement plans, some of the data from Panorama is woven right into those, as it's a big part of our strategic plan goal as well.
Great. I want 3 big snowballs. Let's make a big snowman.
Nick works on that all the time, Christine. He's our consummate cheerleader for making sure everybody's using it to its full extent.
Yep. And as Deidre said, even though I'm a cheerleader for it, when someone in the building or learns of it, they tell someone, I mean, everybody knows about it, but just like everything, there are some things that people embrace more than others. But as people realize that this tool helps support what they're doing and makes their job so much easier, but ultimately helps students to learn better, it sells itself. But yeah, we're constantly giving reminders. A lot of times people ask, how do I find this? Where do I find that? Did you look in Panorama? Oh yeah, I can get that in Panorama. Yeah, everything is one place.
Yeah, I think it takes some time to adjust to a new tool. I know you mentioned that teachers would have to look at 4 places, you know, and so maybe now they're just looking at 2 when they could just go here and get it all. So yeah, I helping the kids to improve is really the main thing. But if the driving force is, hey, you're going to cut down on your workload, you know, that helps too. So I hope the word gets out and we begin to use this tool to the greatest extent that it has to offer us. Thank you.
And comparatively, when we've talked to actually Panorama, we have a really high usage rate for our district. So their response would be that, you've got a lot of people for using it. It was another one of the, we had negotiated a 3-year contract with it so that we had it to consistently use over time. And we're able to fund the first 3 years through the school climate transformation grant. So at the present moment, it's been important for us to use that time to really learn so that we can decide if it's something that budgetarily we want to continue to invest in, which I would say we'd get an overwhelming yes, please, from most of our staff at this point.
And I'm pretty sure it probably be cost effective as well. Thank you.
Sorry. Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Heather's comment made me think in my head. A lot of parents we heard from tonight talked about student engagement and um, mental health kind of being an issue. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial and just something to consider as a district, especially having our secondary schools, maybe retake the survey mid-year, and then that'd be maybe more of a better data point for end of year of for those kids. We can then compare who does come back in person if that's a route we take. So just something to consider if that's as we move cautiously maybe into more options. Is that something as a district we could use to then support those kids?
Yeah, one of the things for sure that we may do more frequently this year is the wellness survey part of it. That was new to us this year. And that really checks in on a couple of the things that are the prime concerns when it comes to virtual learning that we've heard repeatedly, that all the research we read around the nation, right? Here's the reasons you might want to do it. Here's the concerns that you would worry about kids' isolation and mental health. And so that's what the wellness survey, why we did that one this year, is it gives us an assessment of that. And then we can keep doing that one to check in.
Heather?
This isn't really new to us. We've had Panorama for 4 or 5 years. We're just getting more usage now.
Well, we've had it for the first year we had it, we got it mid-year, and we did it only one survey was all we did with it. And then the next year is when we added in the student success and went into the 3-year cycle. So we are in like really our second full year of implementation with it. And this is just the first time since we tied our strategic plan goal to it, we wanted to just do a workshop with the board so that you guys could understand a little bit more around why those data points are so important to us. But we could have done a similar workshop last year and had other staff talk about it at this time last year too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any data looking at students from last school year to this school year to see if there's any difference in these measures, considering that the beginning of last school year, obviously we were 100% in-person school, there's no pandemic, and this school year was the exact opposite, to see if we can see any trends or changes in that. I mean, we hear a lot of things anecdotally, from personal comments and statements, but I would be interested to see from perspective of a global look at that data to see if we can see a major difference.
So the answer to your question is yes, you can see trends, and it's very specific. So you can see a trend for a general category like emotional regulation, or you can also break down all the different questions under that category and see what the trend is. So you can see what percentage of kids answered favorably to that question or to that category, and then it graphs it from each time the survey was taken. So you can see if it's falling, if it's going up. We can see trends amongst questions categories. You can break down the trends from grades 3 through 5 in our elementary schools and grades 6 through 12 in our secondary schools. So it's very specific in terms of what we can see. Absolutely.
And Noah, we took a long, hard look at where did kids report in the surveys last fall compared to last spring? Like, did that tell us anything with the onset of the pandemic and the safer at home? And some things that were really surprising went up, and some things that we thought went down. And so it didn't, as a big global picture, give us any clarity. And so then in the fall, again, we thought, okay, maybe this will be the moment at which it gives us some really global pieces, and it didn't. But what it did do is at each school, and these guys will talk about that a little bit when we jump into school improvement planning, there were some trends in there that they could say, okay, so our students are really struggling with this. And then they added resources and tools. So we should see then, in theory, an uptick in that data when it comes next time. It just didn't we thought it might give us a more clear picture so that as parents were saying this is a concern, we had something to back that up. It was not that clear across our district when we looked at it, fall to spring and then fall to fall again. Kids were saying things like they had better skills in emotional regulation, or emotional regulation score went up. Well, that would be counterintuitive to everything we're hearing anecdotally. So that it wasn't as telling as we were hoping it would be.
All right, thank you. I think that's very interesting. I mean, looking at things from a global perspective is always what we're trying to do as a board. And I think that that's the sort of data that's very useful in these sorts of situations. So thank you.
Yeah. And I'm happy to go through and look at it from the last couple of years on that trend data and share that in my next board update as well, just so you guys can get a picture of how it's grown or moved over time.
Great.
And maybe you'll find a pattern in it that we couldn't see.
Gary?
Does Panorama offer any kind of parent portal?
So it does not, but that doesn't mean we don't share information when we can. So for instance, as a counselor at Frank Lloyd Wright, we have individual planning conferences that are helping the kids to transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. And so some of the counselors utilize Panorama, and I will, so for instance, as we look at what a student's strengths and weaknesses are, so we can discuss what they need to do to better transition, it's nice to have that information. So on a screen, I will share that with parents. We send out a letter saying that the SEL survey is being done each year, and sometimes parents will, we say, if you want your students' data, please contact us and we'll share it. So it's not that it's a secret, we want to share this information, but so much of Panorama is the groupings and that you get as a large school. So it wouldn't be appropriate for every parent to have that account information. But as it relates to sharing some individual things on that student or that parent, we certainly share it. And we're encouraging teachers to share the information more and more during parent-teacher conferences also.
And last year, at several of the advisories at one of our high schools and most of the advisories at the other, part of what they would do during homeroom or advisory time is actually sit next to the student and pull up their Panorama and share that directly with students and use that with our students to help them set goals. So we wished it had a student access portal, actually, because we would love kids to be looking at that independently of us. But that is not a feature that it offers just yet. We've given them that feedback that we would like it to have access so that it should be, this isn't our data, it's our students' data. And we want them to be able to dive into it and check it out for themselves.
Now, because I share it regularly with students, it's not uncommon when a student talks to me like, hey, can I see that? They're not sure what it's called. Can I see that one page on myself again? And because students want feedback, they want to see, what they're doing, how they're improving, how they're not improving. And so they like seeing a snapshot. So I often have students ask for me to share that with them. Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you all very much for sharing.
Appreciate you being here tonight and sitting in for the long haul. This has been a little bit longer than our board meetings have gone in a little while. So we will jump into the next portion of our presentation tonight, which is sharing what we do with our school improvement plans. So I am actually gonna do a couple of slides on this one, and then I'm gonna pass it over to the team. So how we look at our school improvement plans really is from that lens of continuous improvement. And we've talked about continuous improvement as part of strategic planning, and we've talked about continuous improvement as part of how we set goals with teachers and how we set goals with schools. And the school improvement process used to be, you set your goals once a year, and then you filed them in these really pretty binders. And once you got the report done, you stuck it on your shelf. And then in the spring, like late May, somebody would say, hey, it's almost time to update your school improvement plan. And we would all dig it down off our shelves and make a few notes in it and go, oh gosh, is that what I set my goals at for this year? And come to that realization that maybe it wasn't exactly the continuous improvement process that we wanted. So last year, we switched our school improvement process to really be focused on continuous improvement. So the schools each have a format that they use that includes a 30, 60, 90-day plan, so that they're constantly planning, doing something, checking to see if it worked, and then taking action on that and adjusting the plan. And so we redesigned the school improvement plans to read that way, and at the same time adjusted how our leadership and learning team works. So we partnered each with a couple of schools in order to help them drive the school improvement plan to be that part of continuous improvement, regular cycles of feedback. And so Adam, who's with us tonight, he has Franklin, Frank Lloyd Wright, Jefferson, and Hoover. Anne has Irving because she is also our coordinator of special ed. So her plate was a little bit more full. So she just has one school. Chris Miller has Hale, Lane, Mann, and Walker. I took 2 schools this year, so I have Madison and Wilson. Diane Lazaridis has West and Pershing, and then Steve Carr, who's also with us tonight, has Central, Dotke, and Mitchell. For our school support meetings, we meet with those schools every single week. So as opposed to them just coming to meetings where we're telling them a lot about what we want them to do, we're actually going to the school site to say, hey, how can we help support you in implementation of your school improvement plan and in implementation of our strategic plan? But at the school level, it's what are the school's goals that relate to our strategic plan? And that's been a really powerful shift for us. It's made a lot of things move a lot more quickly. Sometimes we affectionately call ourselves the accountability partnership, because we'll show up the next week and say, hey, last week we agreed we were going to work on this, and where are we in that process? And sometimes it's nowhere. This is what the week was like. And sometimes it's, oh, we have really exciting things. This is what's been happening. But that constant meeting regularly, asking what supports, shooting ideas off of each other to say, what could we do? For those of us who do multiple schools especially, it's really nice to be able to say, hey, do you know who else is working on that? Why don't you talk to Leslie at Franklin? You know who else is working on that? Why don't you talk to Josiah at Lane? Because we know a lot of what's going on at all the other schools, and it helps to bridge some of that collaboration in and amongst all of our schools, which contributes to the strategic plan goal and the strategy of understanding what are district-wide things, what are school-based decisions, and then what are classroom-based decisions. And we want to make everybody to feel supported in that process. So how we go about doing that is we start in June or July with a visioning meeting. So our entire leadership and learning team, and then the entire school-based team. So it's usually the principal, assistant principals, deans of students, deeper learning coaches. And in the last year, almost everybody is now bringing their student services staff because they are due a ton of support around the plan at the school level. And we spend about 3.5 hours talking to each individual school. So yes, that is why it takes so long, because there are 18 of them, and all 5 of us or all 6 of us go every single time. And we look at what did we do really well last year? What are we trying to do? What's our vision for the school? What does the data tell us that we're doing really well? What does the data tell us we need to work on? What staff need our support? What are our coaching cycles going to look like? So we spend about 3.5 hours coming up with kind of a plan. And then in August, we do a workshop with our leadership team. So a year ago, August, it was George Kiros came in and did a workshop with us in the morning, and then we spent all afternoon writing these plans. The year before that was the year we went and did the deeper learning deep dive downtown, where we sent everybody off on like a scavenger hunt adventure around town, and then spent the afternoon writing school improvement plans. And then this year we had Dr. Emden with us in the morning in early August, and then we spent the afternoon writing school improvement plans. So each time the idea is that the plan can evolve and grow with the feedback that we get. And then they go back to each school site after that workshop in August and really get the nuts and bolts into the plan. And in my last board update, I shared just the overall goal page. You'll see some more of the details with the 3 schools that are going to share tonight. Then they go out to all staff and share the plan. This has to be a living, breathing plan if it truly is going to be continuous improvement. So teachers have the opportunity to give input. The secretary should be there in most cases, the facility staff. Sometimes our Sodexo people get to join in the conversation when they're really tied into the culture of that school. And they, once a month, regularly review the plan at the school site. It's been a little tougher to do that this year. So we're doing it as often as we can. And then they do, every month when they come to leadership, that's a portion of what we do at our leadership team meetings, as we learn something new for the beginning part. And then they roll into doing some protocols with small groups of other staff to review their plan. So all last year, we started every leadership meeting with either a panel of our learners, our teachers, or parents telling us things that we're doing really well in our schools and telling us some things that we need to work on. And sometimes they were originally the first panel we ever had was students from Dotke telling us why they ended up needing a credit recovery option in 11th grade, what parts of the school system didn't work for them. We had a parent panel of parents of students with special needs come and talk to us about what does that feel like to be a member of our school community. We've had teacher panels, learner panels, everybody under the sun. And they would come and talk to us for the first part of the meeting. And then the teams each get into some small groups to do a tuning protocol. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second, with some time to refine, and then they take it back to their staff, and the plan continues to evolve and have checkpoints to it. Each plan has 5 to 6 goals, which sounds like a lot, but it's really hits at all of those different lenses that we want to do to make sure that we're hitting at the goals of our strategic plan. The link in this presentation, which I'll share with you, is a video that explains exactly what a tuning protocol is. We're not going to watch that because we are getting late here in the evening. And we're actually just going to jump into practicing. So what a protocol is actually designed to do is to narrow down your opportunity to interact, get feedback, and immediately iterate. And there are a million protocols that we could have used tonight. This is the one we mostly use for school improvement planning. And so what's going to happen tonight is our 3 schools that are going to share are going to have 3 minutes to share with everybody how they use Panorama in their school improvement planning. How do they engage staff in the process of setting the goals and monitoring progress? And how are they actually monitoring the goals? And then they're going to ask a question of the group. Here is a piece of our school improvement plan on which I would like feedback. And then we're going to ask clarifying questions for 1 minute. And I'm actually going to keep a timer, and it's going to ding, and then we're all going to have to stop where we are, because otherwise you never get all of these done. The clarifying questions are really things that can be answered with a yes or a no, or give a specific number, like how many times have you met with the staff in your school improvement plan? Then we have 3 minutes to give feedback. And what I'm going to ask is for each school, if 3 board members would be the feedback panel, and then we'll rotate through. And if everybody takes 3, by the time we're done, you'll each have an opportunity to be part of that feedback cycle. The feedback also always has to be helpful, specific, and kind. So I like your plan is never feedback we give each other. We say things like, what I find really interesting about your plan is that you've moved your Panorama data in this area from this to this. What I'm wondering about is, how did you do that? Or were there specific strategies that you really focused in on? So those would be some things that we would give as feedback. And then at the end, there's a very short open discussion, and then we stop. And then the next person in a small group would go ahead and give their presentation. So tonight with us, we have Brianne Wilms, who's the principal at both Wilson and Madison. She's going to talk about Madison's school improvement plan tonight. Josiah Pladell, who's our new principal at Lane, who got knee deep into protocols and school improvement planning shortly after he joined us. So some of that work was newer to him, and he's really embraced it. And then Brian Summerfield is here from Central to share their plan as well. So in order to get us started, I just need 3 volunteers to give feedback on the first plan, which will be Brianne's.
Was that Rosen?
I will.
All right. Stephanie's going to go for Brianne. Who else wants to pick Brianne? I don't know, Brianne. Maybe this will tell you something.
I know.
I will.
I'll go.
All right. Gary said, and did I hear you, Heather?
Yes.
Okay. So your job is going to be that we're all going to listen to the whole plan, but you are the only ones who are going to get to ask clarifying questions and give feedback on the plan. So you're the only members of the team that will be able to do that in the process. And everyone else just gets to kind of listen, and then you'll get your turn to do that when one of the other schools goes and presents. I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen though, so that they can share their screen so that you'll know. But if you have any questions about the protocol or the process, you can ask me as we go. All right, Brianne, you are up.
My 3 minutes starting?
Let me give me 1 second to get my timer up, and then yes.
All right, let me make sure I can share my screen. I gotta make sure I can find it in here. Here we go.
All right, let me know when you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay, go.
All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of more background. So when we originally started looking at our school improvement plan for Madison, we started with goals. The first one actually was looking at GVC, the Guaranteed Viable Curriculum, had looking at student choice. But then we realized, so these were our goals initially, but then we realized like, oh, we're going to use a student survey
to monitor our results for employee engagement and parent engagement. But then that survey changed. So I just want to let it be known that this really is a fluid document that is changing, which has been extremely helpful for us. So when you look at our strategies, we actually have our old goals here, and I put this little note because I want to remind our staff, just like when we're working with our students and our parents, it's an ever-changing process based on our students, and we're always shifting based on their need. So when we were doing this, we first were going to use our panorama data. So that's how we were involving this, because we looked at our social emotional well-being of our kids using that panorama data. And at first, we saw that only 34% of our students were regulating their emotions well. Well, that's not very high, right? So we did want to switch and increase that to 50%. The method that we were going to use for that was a co-taught method of social emotional learning. However, with us being virtual, that method just wasn't, and we got a new school counselor into Madison. So just looking at our needs, that really wasn't what would work for us. So we did change that goal up a bit. So you'll see our new goals are actually listed on this page here. So they change kind of throughout as we go on. We also we did the first 30 days and we looked at making, so our goals are listed right here. So the first thing we wanted to do within that 30 days is we do PLCs at Madison. So we have vertical teams of our younger grades and our older grades, and we do that twice a week. So at the end of each cycle, this is how we bring our staff in. They look at these goals, we develop our strategies, we look to see did we actually do those strategies, and then develop new ones. So you'll see the first 30 days, our strategy was, when you're looking at the curriculum, to look at our PLC norms, to make sure that we have our protocols in place. And then we actually were asking our staff, how are we going to monitor our reading goal? Because we used to use MAP scores. We aren't using them this year based on virtual learning. So we wanted their feedback on that. As you can see, we were green here. So when we checked in at the end of that 30 days, we made that goal. We then were going to do that co-teaching, which we did set that up. We looked at establishing the norms, and then having our new SEL teacher doing a rotation to build relationships with kids. So we did do that part, but then you'll see we switched up our goal. And then again, we switched up, like our employee engagement was just recognizing staff more. So that was the first 30 days. But then you'll see we went and we said, okay, instead of doing 60 days, that doesn't really make sense for us. Instead, we're going to use a time frame that makes sense. So we reviewed those goals at the end of September, like was our goal. Then we said, all right, we're going to take this up until the holiday break, which is right now. And you'll see at our last PLC, we went and reviewed our latest goals right here. And our goals then, our instruction was to increase student choice. We changed our equity goal to be not based on panorama this time around, but based on attendance, because we really wanted to make sure all of our students were having access to that grade level, to all content really. We looked at our employee engagement more based on me providing feedback. And then our parent engagement was, we just wanted them to be involved, and how could we involve them more? So when we met with our staff, which we've been doing pretty regularly in our PLCs, these are the new goals that we're currently working on down here. Deidre, what's that last question?
Yeah. So just how are you monitoring progress? And I think you kind of hit at that.
Okay,
I let it go a little longer because that was our first attempt at it. But now we have 1 minute. Rand, do you have a framing question? What part of the plan, like feedback on for the group?
Okay, so we feel like the next direction, because we think we've done well at goal setting. We've gotten our staff involved, and we've done this in so much that it's routine. Now our question becomes, how can we begin to engage our families more in the school improvement planning process? Because I take this to our PTA and I do like my spiel, if you will, to our parents, but they're not really making the decisions with us, and we want for them to be more in the decision making process and less of the here's what we've already done, you know. So just trying to involve our families a little bit differently, I guess, is my question.
Okay, so Stephanie, Heather, and Gary, you have 1 minute to ask any clarifying questions you may have.
How do you go from being global in your thought on our strategy needs to be how to engage families more to developing more specific details and strategies? That seems like it's a very daunting task both for you and the staff members that are engaged in that.
So you're saying make it a more specific question?
Yeah. How do you get from that? So my clarifying question is, how do you take the goal, the strategic goal of engagement, right? Family engagement, and dive into that and get staff buy-in and dive into that for coming up with realistic check boxes. This is what we can do. This is what we can do. This is what we can do. That has something tangible.
She doesn't actually answer the questions.
That's fine.
She just takes them. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
So you had mentioned that, for example, you said Panorama didn't provide something for attendance, so you weren't using it. Are there areas where, in the case like with virtual learning, there are gaps that Panorama exists within Panorama that you would like to see closed?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Because I actually, so when we started out in September, we said we're not going to use that data. Instead, we wanted to focus in on attendance. Now we have attendance squared away. So now we've actually gone back and we're using our fall 2020 Panorama data because we've noticed a slide from last fall in growth mindset, which is actually feedback we've gotten from our parents as well through just when we called and we asked them some feedback for us. They're struggling with how to get their students to fit, like we feel like we're having more meltdowns with students, right? Like if they're not getting something or they're struggling, they just kind of melt down. And that is like because they're struggling with growth mindset. So we did put that in for our goal now is to how can we start increasing that growth mindset? And that's measured by Panorama. So we circled back to it, but it's ever evolving, if you will.
All right, so now we have 3 minutes to give Brianne some feedback on the plan. That's kind, specific, and helpful. So things that you can tell her things that you really liked about the plan. You can give her areas to grow in the plan. And then the end result will be the question she's asking us is how could she get families more engaged in the process of setting that goal? So she'll be looking for some suggestions and ideas between the 3 minutes of feedback and the 1 minute of final discussion. So feedback for Brianne.
Something. Heather, go ahead. Go first.
I was just going to say, like, the fact that you realized early on that, hey, we need to reevaluate quickly and change our process. I really appreciate that you didn't stop to think, no, we're going to make this work. You thought, nope, how are we going to make it a fluid and keep it moving and keep that forward momentum going?
I did timeline adjustment was critical, that it doesn't have to fit into a 30, 60, 90. It has to fit for community. And that's critical, that it's not a cookie cutter, that it's adjustable based on the needs of your learners and your staff. So very positive there that you're able to do that on the fly.
Yeah, I like the break at the holiday break. I think that, with the way things have been this year, that break from school will help families, and measuring up to that point in time, I think was a good idea.
I'll jump in with one as well. I appreciated how you're sharing that with your PTA because I think that's a good step in the direction of trying to get at this piece of family engagement, even though you feel like that's not quite getting you there yet. I thought that was a smart move. Other feedback for Brianne?
It's difficult with sharing with PTA only because PTA only hits a limited audience. As most of us who've been involved in the PTAs have, know that you have your group there, but it doesn't always extend beyond that reach. So to identify other opportunities, whether it's through social media, whether it's through classroom communication, sometimes the power of the individual teacher to a classroom or to specific parents to communicate the message can be critical. It can help be a breakthrough because that's where a lot of parents will connect, is the individual classroom as opposed to the building. So I think that there's always opportunities there that hasn't been tried or in different ways or.
And Marty, you are welcome to jump in on this as well. You don't often get to give feedback when we do these in groups because there's so many of them at one time.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. And then we end it. Time's up on that one. So we end it with 1 minute of just general discussion. Other things you wanted to share with Brianne about the plan, questions Brianne might want to ask you guys. And then what she does with this information is she takes it back to the team. She says, okay, I got some feedback on some things we might want to try. And then they work on those goals all over again.
I mean,
for that.
I was gonna say, just based on that feedback I got, the social media thing. So for when I rolled this out at one point, we didn't have enough time to meet with the PLC. So I actually did like a flipped PD and like wrote kind of what we're doing right now and then shared it with staff and then said, okay, we're going to meet so I can get some feedback just to save some time. That would be interesting to do that rollout with our families, right? Like, why can't we post that to Class Dojo so they become familiar? Like, oh, we have a school improvement plan, and then maybe go into the next part of getting some more actual decision making, like take those baby steps so that they know that it's there first, even if they can't come to that PTA meeting. So I'd like that.
Yeah, I have a question or maybe clarification. So the goals can completely change after the review, correct? So if you could have a goal and then based on the information you've gathered, a goal could completely drop off as you move into the next period.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Like, that attendance goal didn't make sense anymore because we were pretty much at 100%. So we wanted to strive for the next thing. So that's why we brought that panorama back into it.
So, and then a second question related to that. So then when developing these goals or modifying the goals, adding new goals, what's the process to build consensus on that?
We kind of just talk about it as a team, as a staff, to be honest. Usually I'll come to the PLC meetings with like some drafts. Otherwise it doesn't really go anywhere. But oftentimes, like a lot of the ideas, especially right in here and adding on that panorama, that didn't come from me necessarily. That came from the discussion we had with our staff, if that makes sense. But I usually do come with like an idea. Otherwise we all, sometimes you come in with extra coffee.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then Brian, can you click on the PD tab just really quickly?
Yeah.
So that's the other place. So this only works if the staff have the right tools to make all those goals happen. So this one evolves really quickly because what we think we might need for professional development in August could be really different by September. And as opposed to waiting and saying, oh, next year we should probably offer some sessions on this. This is also a space where staff can put right in the plan, like, hey, I'm looking for some ideas on this, or hey, I really need us to run a professional development about this, if this is the goal that we're trying to meet. And so that's where it really does become true continuous improvement, because we're constantly saying, what are we doing really well? Where are we making progress? Where do we have holes? How are we filling those holes? And then what tools and support do staff need in order to make that happen? And that sharing of what they're all doing for professional development is a lot of times the most helpful part about doing that with other schools. They'll say, oh, you took that online class with some of your teachers. How was that? You did this. How was that? Hey, I found a super cool PD thing. We did this with our group. Or, hey, it was really cool to watch one of my teachers lead this. And then sometimes that's led to that teacher leading it at a different school or helping out somewhere else, which really helps increase our collaboration as our district as a whole.
Yeah, like when you see this here, this was project-based tuning for one of our 4 or 5s teams, but we actually involved, like Deidre came to that one. There were teachers from Wilson that came to that one, and they got a lot more feedback because it wasn't just the same people that have, it's just different when you haven't been to a project tuning protocol before and it's new to you, it's more exciting. So we felt like it was pretty beneficial for us to kind of reach out.
And then both Madison and Wilson work with one of our coaches from Blue Dot, who they also teach at High Tech High, right? But the company we work with is called Blue Dot. And so Brian comes in and checks in with their staff regularly, and then they can look at this plan and say, "Ooh, we need a coaching session sooner." Or when we hired a new staff member, we could have him do a nuts and bolts, how do you do this kind of work right away with a brand new staff member versus having to wait until there was like a next training day or a next opportunity. It's that live time feedback that teachers often need. Like, I'm stuck on this today. I need a strategy or a resource or something to solve that problem quickly. Otherwise it festers and it just gets worse.
It's just this format makes it like, it makes sense, right? Like, because Deidre wasn't lying. It was like you used to do a SIP plan at the beginning of the year and you never really revisited it, where this is like truly guiding a lot of our work. And it helps us as leaders to be like, oh yeah, like this is our focus. We really need to hone in on this. And we've seen a lot of progress at Madison. I do think a lot of it is because we keep on coming back to our vision, our mission, our small goals.
And then we'll review this when we have our school support meetings, or like when they were struggling to get certain pieces of it written, then I could give some protocol feedback and say, hey, if I'm listening to it, why don't you think about doing this with it, or take this back to your team? And then that helped them move forward when they got stuck versus waiting again until setting up a meeting with somebody or something like that. That natural collaboration is just happening more regularly. All right, thanks, Brianne, and thanks, feedback partners. So I need 3 more feedback partners, and we'll do Lane next. I know it's getting late. Noah said he would do it.
I'll go.
Brian?
I'll do it.
Kristen's got this one. Okay. Thank you, guys. It helps when we are doing feedback protocols, we always narrow the feedback down to just particular people within a large group. Otherwise, you're never going to hear all the voices that you were looking to hear. So with that, I will pass it over to Josiah, who will share his plan that's going to have the exact same format as the one for Madison, but it's going to have drastically different things that they're working on.
Good evening. So in our plan, we have the goals around reading, math, equity, employee engagement, and parent satisfaction. And just to touch on the panorama that we talked about before, that's really where our equity goal was created from. We looked back at survey data from a year ago, and then the fall wellness survey, and decided to focus our efforts in equity around students' sense of belonging, which based off of last year, 36% of students felt a sense of belonging at Lane. And so our goal is to improve that to 50% by the end of this school year. And our other goals kind of tie into that. The employee engagement was around feedback. Our teachers want feedback. So improving that from 76% on the survey last year to 85% this year. And then parent satisfaction, we focused on positive parent communication. So in the survey data from last year, our composite score was 2.96 of parents who felt like they received positive feedback from Lane. And we want to improve that to 3.75 for this school year. So looking at employee engagement, parent satisfaction, and that really driving our work around improving the sense of belonging, also ties into our reading and math goals. And with this year, with not having standard data points that we have typically because of virtual and the virus, we had to get creative. And so we looked at kind of using this as an opportunity while we were virtual to push into work instructionally around the deeper learning competencies. And so we picked 2 deeper learning competencies, the competency of effective communication and the competency of problem solving. And so we wanted to align those with math and English language arts. And it seemed natural that problem solving would go with math and communication with English language arts. And through our discussion in our SIP planning, we decided to flip that and put communication with math and then problem solving with English language arts. And so in order to assess this and get baseline data and progress monitoring and see where we're at, we've had to actually create rubrics that assess students in the area of problem solving and the area of communication. And we did that through staff. The math staff created the communication rubric with Carrie Skonecki, our deeper learning coach. And then I led our ELA staff and social studies staff around the problem solving rubric. So that allowed us a way to assess our students in those competencies and provide us with data. So we want to have all kids, or not all kids, 80% of our students performing at proficient or higher in each of those competencies at the end of this school year. And so the idea behind communication and problem solving, that contributes into that sense of belonging goal. That's our equity goal. And it all kind of ties in around making kids feel welcome in our learning community. You're muted, Deidre.
I couldn't hit unmute fast enough. Sorry about that. Yeah. So thank you, Josiah. That was awesome. Right at 3 minutes. That was very efficient. What's your framing question you have for the group? And Adam, can you also jump in on this one to give feedback as well?
My framing question would be, I was going to use the same thing Brianne had, but she stole mine. So I'll go in a different direction. I guess the framing question would be other creative ways to improve that sense of belonging through the different themes that our goals are set around.
Okay, awesome. So we have 1 minute to ask any clarifying questions if something about the plan wasn't clear.
Josiah,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Noah.
I was just going to ask when the evaluation of the plan, like, is there a check-in point to determine if you're making your way towards your goals beyond the scores from the surveys, or are you just you're waiting until the next survey data to see if what you've done is working?
For our strategies that you can see down here, so under parent satisfaction, we've got things built in that we're kind of implementing, and we won't assess or survey parents around that until later in the school year. But those strategies, we have purchasing postcards so that teachers can handwrite positive notes and send home. We started a monthly school newsletter called the Patriot Press that goes out monthly, and there's been 2 editions already. That includes we had a staff spotlight in December, and January we'll continue with the staff spotlight, and then students of the month to enhance that positive communication from home, and then really building on that newsletter to leverage that as an opportunity to engage parents while continuing to send home the positive postcards. So we've identified strategies to hopefully improve that, but we don't have any progress monitoring system to assess that progress until the end of the year survey.
How often are you kind of putting this plan out to staff, whether if it's a data review or a goal review or a goal revision?
So the plan is really driving a lot of work with staff collectively in different areas. So the plan was presented once to staff around the goals, and then our evaluation process was tied into this through interviews with staff members, discussing the goals, discussing their practice, their opportunities for growth, their strength areas, and then working at setting a goal for them both in professional practice to learn and then to improve student outcomes. Their individual goal, what's called the SLO goal, has to align to one of these building-wide goals. So it's been presented to staff, it's been shared with staff. Their professional development work that they're doing throughout the year ties into this. And then we will also, staff are involved in creating the rubric with collecting the data in the content areas around the rubrics that tie into the math and reading goal. So the SIP hasn't formally been presented other than one time, but it's really driving the work that we do collectively throughout the year in everything that we do.
All right, awesome. So now we have 3 minutes just to give Josiah feedback that is kind, specific, and helpful.
How do you intend to use, I know we're virtual, how do you intend to use problem-based learning to support student belonging?
Project-based learning?
Yeah.
Well, I think through project-based learning, you give students ownership in their learning and allow them choice in what they're doing within that project. So I think when you empower students, and that also aligns to the deeper learning competency of self-directed learning and academic mindset. But when you provide kids that choice and that ownership in their educational journey, that hopefully will improve that sense of belonging, where kids are involved in doing this together and we're facilitating their learning as opposed to teacher dominated or teacher directed learning.
Do students create their own SMART goals? And if so, are SMART goals considered with when teachers are looking at their own SLO growth, and are SMART goals also like, well, let's just start there. Are you doing SMART goals with students?
Yes, students have participated in SMART goal setting pretty much on a weekly basis in what's our base group, which is like an advisory period at the high school level. But they're involved in that. And then teachers are also using goal setting in their content areas, working with kids as far as like personal reading time and setting a goal as how much time you want to allocate to independent reading. And so SMART goals are in practice. I don't know the consistency of that, but then the other piece of your question around with the SLO process, that is a SMART goal. So the goal statement that a teacher writes that drives their growth and measured by student learning is written in the SMART format as well.
Are teachers expected to do PPDs at your school?
Yes. So
and are they also SLO, like to align to these this goal of belonging, or is it kind of more personalized?
The PPG and the SLO can align to any one of the building-wide goals. So it can be reading, math, equity, employee engagement, or parent satisfaction. And so the SLO is like a broader statement that they want students to show growth in. And then the PPG is instructed to be a small component of that broader goal where teachers really want to enhance their skill level this year through their own professional learning.
So I really like that you used the sense of belonging as one of your main goals that you're trying to center a lot of the other goals around. I would agree that I think that sense of belonging would be something that could drive all these other goals to really improve if you can get that one goal increased. And I was wondering if possibly if youth advisors, I believe Lane has a youth advisor, would be utilized in specifically in that one goal, but maybe in some of the other goals as well to help motivate and communicate with students.
Yes, so we haven't had a youth advisor this year due to pandemic related issues, but that is with that equity piece around the sense of belonging. That is an area I think it would be essential to incorporate our youth advisor in that goal and what that means and what that looks like, and going over the questions specifically in the Panorama survey that align to that data point, to really build capacity and create alignment in the role of the youth advisor and supporting that at the building-wide level.
Yeah, I appreciated the large step of having a co-created rubric with the teachers and having them have that rubric. I can see those links there with the effective communication. And I wonder what it would look like to have that as a student and teacher co-created rubric where they would take some ownership on where their skills are developing as learners. So thank you.
All right, so we'll give Brian a chance to give a little feedback, and then we'll kind of wrap this one up and do centrals as well, because we're getting late into the evening now.
Thanks. Yeah, I just.
Oh, Brian, I was gonna jump real fast. I'm sorry. I just want to say I did appreciate all this. If I came across sounding not as happy, I love this kind of stuff. So I was trying to get into the meat of it. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I'll keep mine brief. I really liked, again, kind of tying everything into the sense of belonging, and even more so, including the parent satisfaction and employee engagement portions to that. just because I feel like both of those entities are so important to that student sense of belonging. So I think that's awesome. I also liked how you flipped when you were talking about the effective communication and problem solving skills. I like how you flipped that from what kind of does come most easily from that thought process to switching that effective communication to math and that problem solving to the English and so forth. So I thought that was really good and just overall a really good job.
And that's something that came out of kind of some of your school supports as well, right, Josiah, as you guys were talking through, because sometimes what's really nice is we're outside, we're not, we can see the forest through the trees on our leadership and learning team because we're not in the, in the weeds in the school running it every day. So sometimes it's easier for us to be able to say, hey, have you thought about when we look at those plans globally? So that's also really helped with the process. And I would say Josiah, again, remember, is a first-year principal. As is Corey, who we had earlier presenting on panorama data. So I just want to say thank you, Josiah, as a first-year principal, to be jumping in at the level you have in some of this work, as well as been one of my first volunteers to jump in on tonight and share what's going on at Lane with the board. We're really thankful for that. So thank you. All right. So according to my list, I've got Jeff and Bill and Christine to give feedback to Brian. And Steve, if you would jump in and help us give feedback as well, that would be amazing. Steve is also the school support at Central, so he gets to meet with this team. He probably knows this plan inside and out.
Okay. Like a little bit of a ringer, but I'm ready.
All right. So Deidre, I got 45 minutes. Is that right?
Exactly, Brian, because everyone was hoping. We were really hoping you could take us right. Actually, you could have all the way up till midnight because we haven't had the opportunity to have such a late board meeting. So.
Sure. I'm glad I can do that. I'm Brian Summerfield, one of the assistant principals at Central High School. So I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes here. In terms of how we engaged and started staff on this journey, we actually started, if you guys can see my screen, hopefully, we start with the district strategic plan that is set for 2020 to 2025. And we kind of broke that down into, okay, what are areas that we can control as a building? And that kind of helped guide our work as a SIP team. And one thing that was really critical for us as we developed our goals for the SIP was the panorama data, which is brought up many times already tonight. In terms of our own work with that, just for a quick snapshot, I had to tell this, is in the spring when we were doing emergency learning, we had 360 of our 1,000 kids complete the survey, which was only 36%. When we did this in the fall, it was 82%. Which was a huge thing to actually put that kind of emphasis on it and get that kind of engagement in a panorama survey was really big. And it showed and kind of guided some of our work, especially as it related to equity and deeper learning. So once staff got to see the strategic plan for the district, it got broken down into their ability to add goals to areas they seem fit. So obviously, I'll show the district plan real quick again. We didn't focus on financial stability and efficiency because that wasn't within our control. So we tried to specifically focus on these 3 categories, and then we broke that down into the SIP, where we had our panorama goal, our deeper learning, our equity, our ACT, our employee engagement, and parent satisfaction. In terms of how our staff got to further influence that was we did require and encourage, and it really worked out really well, that our SLOs, our student learning outcomes, were all aligned to our SIPs as well. And some of our staff picked ACT. Some of our staff surprised us and picked department-wide goals that focused on deeper learning and employability. So that was a really cool kind of positive thing to see from some of that work. In terms of our some of our things that we've worked on and our strategies, we've really tried to focus on that equity piece. And we've challenged our staff to be in professional development, book studies, and continue to kind of change our mindsets and grow our mindsets, because that's where that's going to really impact that panorama data, especially when it comes to our emotional regulation. Only 40% of our students said they felt emotionally regulated during the fall. And that's going to be a huge challenge if and when we return to the building. So looking kind of a little further at that, our employee, some of our other goals, employee engagement, we wanted to make sure our staff was going to try to take on those 30-day and 90-day check-ins. Could we get about an agree on an average for those questions? And then for our parent satisfaction, can we get about a agree? Just to highlight real quick our parent satisfaction stuff, we were really pleased with some of our work with, scroll down some of our strategies here. You probably recognize this kind of looked with Brianne, but we were really pleased with how our parent satisfaction went in terms of our social media engagement and our constant communication and the amount of phone calls our staff with having up to 150 kids made to our families. And I'm gonna switch to my framing question here, and that's our deeper learning work. And it's how do we continue to measure that equity and that deeper learning, especially when the playing field seems more uneven than it's ever been for some of our kids who at home, at the secondary level, are working jobs, doing all these different things, taking care of the little ones. How do we kind of continue to measure, keep that part of our focus and that equity and that deeper learning work? And I know I'm over 4 minutes.
It's okay. It's all right, Brian. I wasn't going to cut you off. That was important. Okay, so any clarifying questions for Brian, or we could jump right into some feedback. Okay, so we have 3 minutes for your feedback partners to give you feedback on the plan that's kind, specific, and helpful, that gives some reflections on the plan, as well as addresses some of the question that Brian has, is how are we really going to look to figure out where we maybe have some gaps and some deeper learning opportunities given the year that we've had, where we have some kids going through a hard time.
Deidre, I had a question, not necessarily a clarifying one, but how do you incorporate the deeper learning in like a metal shop or music or physical education? Because I kind of come from that special background and I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around what's being done in those areas.
Do I answer this one, Deidre? I just let that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, actually, some of those classes lend itself more to deeper learning because of the PBL focus and because of the collaboration that needs to happen. It's trickier in virtual learning, but some of our teachers have done some pretty cool things. Our art teacher does an amazing job with some of that work of allowing students to, and our cooking teacher, allowing students to cook at home, allowing students to pursue what cooking avenues they want to do. Our art teacher does that while having students explore and identify things in the community. We can still do socially distant. But some of that CTE stuff is even stronger with deeper learning than your traditional grit and grind math that can be a little more intensive.
Well, that's good to hear, because I hate to have them, you know, standing at the station watching the train go by.
All right, other feedback for Brian.
Brian, I'll be interested, you know, and I've been involved in several of the book study experiences over at Central, how that helps you to bring about those measurements and that equity, because all those texts are about equity. I'll be interested to see how that book study kind of works its way through the staff, because this is I love that if you could also clarify ILT, how that teacher leadership group has helped to formulate some of these goals. But as it works its way through the staff, I think that's going to be a really powerful piece for the Central team. That was a suggestion.
I appreciate the fact that you're focusing on panorama and putting it at the forefront as an area to improve, because I believe these tools are and this data is only as good as how we use them and how easy it is for teachers to use these tools and see results from using these types of tools. So I appreciate that, and I think that's very important.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I'm going to follow along well, but I think the question that you're asking of us is a large, big, huge chunk. And
Yes.
what needs to happen is to just break it down slowly. And if you just ask in each area, what is one thing that we can do in this to achieve that goal? What is one thing here that we can do to achieve that goal? So just make it a little bit smaller and then just circle back around to make sure that all those pieces are working together to, you know, obtain what it is that you're looking to achieve.
All right.
I
Thank
think it's
you
a
guys.
lofty goal.
It
You
is a
want-
lofty goal. I would say, Brian, one thing, if you don't mind highlighting from the team at Central, is getting the school improvement plan in front of staff was a struggle last year. And this year, the buy-in from the teacher team and developing these goals and really owning them has shifted quite a bit. You just want to talk a little bit about how you guys got that to happen?
Yeah, it was kind of actually start with the equity non-negotiables. Oddly enough, we had them do a survey back when we first got in September, August actually, and it was analyzing those equity non-negotiables, and that was really the umbrella to all our work. And we mentioned several times this is going to be kind of the driving force to our SIP. And that made, when we kind of had the staff look at the district strategic plan, because some had never looked at that before, like, oh, like, yeah, we have this strategic plan, and look, equity is everywhere. So that kind of was one of our ideas, was continued exposure, and then a belief that this wasn't going away, that we are going to continue to look at the SIP. This isn't something that's going to disappear in a month or 2 months, 3 months, or SLOs about it. We're going to talk in your SLOs in the future. I think that belief that this was something that was here to stay and this was something that drive what we're going to do, I think that was kind of the change a little bit in the culture we saw with it.
Yeah, and then can you just click on your professional development tab?
Yeah.
Because I know that's been purposeful and intentional. And I forgot to mention, Lane also works with our team from Blue Dot Education, and they work with Andrew. Team Central also works with Brian, who has Madison and Wilson as well. And so he meets with the teams pretty regularly to project tune and give feedback like this. So what a teacher might do at the same time, is they wouldn't present a whole school improvement plan. When we did it at Madison, they said, hey, our next unit of instruction is going to be around traveling around the United States, and how are we going to incorporate all these different pieces? So they laid out what they thought they were going to do as a project plan, and then we did this, and we gave them feedback, and we said, hey, have you thought about what if you did this? And the project is so much more clear and direct for kids and purposeful and meaningful, given the fact that they got feedback from someone other than that doesn't even work in their school setting. So for you guys, adding in the professional development and really getting that to be teachers saying, okay, you're right. If these are the goals I'm working on, here's something I need to work on, has been also a big thing you guys have worked on.
Yeah, and just to highlight some of that deeper learning with some of our high-tech high work has been really helpful, and our flex team. So our flex team is a team that focuses, primarily on some PBL and deeper learning, and that work has been really helpful with Brian over from Delgado from High Tech High. That's been huge. Him checking in, him constantly as a resource for them.
Awesome. One thing, as you talk about narrow focus, and then we'll finish this one up, is that you guys also made a really intentional plan. We had done the Trusted Adult Survey, so that's in the wellness survey. And last year, when we did the Trusted Adult Survey for the first time, we did not get quite the percentage of kids saying they had a trusted adult at school that we would have liked. And that has been very purposeful work that you guys have pushed on quite a bit at Central. And we saw a significant higher number of students saying that they had a trusted adult at school when we did the wellness survey. So do you just want to share, Brian, like what's one of the things you asked teachers to do to make sure that kids knew that they had trusted adults at school?
Yeah, I think one of the things we had was those constant contacts home. I mean, I know that sounds, very trivial and simple, but that had a lot of success for us, was the community outreach we had with our staff, calling home, physically calling home. And like I said, sometimes with 150 to up to 180 kids, that can seem daunting, but we use an advisory, especially, we're able to kind of focus that and make it about 30, 25, 30 kids you were responsible for. And that was one way to kind of help continue and that work. And then the restorative circles we've done that are allowing staff and students to constantly connect on a personal level that's not always a pure academic sense. That's been a huge, huge boost for some of that work as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to our three presenters. Any other general questions for us about school improvement planning before we finish this one up for tonight? It's certainly been a work in progress for us to get this far. And all 18 of our school sites could have come and presented a similar plan, but yet with a real focus that each school is working on the things that are right for that school and that community. So we had 3 volunteers tonight, and thankfully we didn't get any more because we really would have been here a long time. But it gave you a sense of what that looks like. And then you guys have the goals from each school. They were attached in the last my last board update, so that you can just kind of, now you've got a framework to be able to say like, oh, hey, that's where those goals are coming from. And while although they look similar, sometimes they're drastically different in the strategies that they're working on each school site. But pushing into this continuous improvement model is some of where we've seen the academic progress and the sense of belonging progress, especially that we've seen in the last couple of years.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing this and for having everybody come and for everybody staying late. You all have to get up and work with students tomorrow. And so thank you for that, for the great work and the consistency and the visioning that is happening. We're so far along and so much better than where we were several years ago. So thank you for the focus of where you all are right now with doing this. You're really making a difference in where we're going. So thank you. Anybody else have any other last comments for our group tonight before we go into the next phase? You guys most of you guys get to be done. We're not done yet. So
the board still has
board still has more to do. But okay, so if there isn't anything else, we will look to take a quick 5-minute recess. And then the link was sent to us by Suzette to jump on for executive session. So we will look to start executive session at approximately 9:31. So we will take a quick recess and then jump back onto that link and go through our next session. So we'll see everybody on the other side.